The story begins with a woman calling for the player. His name is Jang Soo-woon, and she extends her hand, warning that there is not much time left. It is explained that the demon of greed led a demonic army, and thus created a temple made of rare gold. This temple originally existed at the top of the tower. However, after the third divine demonic war, the remaining demonic forces, including this temple, were expelled. The demons ended up being exterminated, and this place, which seemed to enjoy peace, was suddenly attacked and eventually annihilated. The intruders moved through constellations with a power surpassing that of the gods and thus wiped out all the players. As a result, the tower became a graveyard for players. As he walks, the hero thinks that he can't believe the era of the 10,000 demons has fallen to the 22nd floor. But in this way, he has the chance to turn the game around to find what he was searching for, the vault and Amona. With a gaze full of determination, he begins to consider the possibility of going back in time. The system notifies that the player Sion has entered the era of the 10,000 demons. This is the first time a player has entered this era, achieving a historic feat, and it is said that he has entered the realm of the gods as a human. Relieved, the hero says that he has finally arrived. Looking around, he realizes that this is the era of the 10,000 demons and is impressed. Suddenly, the ceiling starts to collapse, and he wonders if he has realized where he is. At that moment, he decides to use the unique skill Journey Guide. This is the best skill for exploration, adventure, and searching obtained through the hero's leap. Using this skill, he asks it to lead him to the vault and an Amona. Quickly, he starts running toward the crystal to find what he seeks. However, he becomes confused as he realizes he is heading toward a dead end. Being at least somewhat intelligent, the protagonist realizes that this is a secret passage, so he pulls a candelabrum. Upon opening the passage, he understands that there is a lot of space in the area. Grabbing his own candelabrum, he begins to descend the stairs of the bizarre dungeon. Reaching a gigantic golden door, he understands that this must be the place. With the key in hand, he comments that he never imagined he would be grateful to Felchus since he screwed him over every time he could. Going back in time, the man offers the hero the key as payment. Irritated, the protagonist states that the contract did not mention this, and that if the man continues like this, he is out. With a malicious smile, a stylish man says that if he cancels the contract with the guide, his career as an adventurer is over. Returning to the present, the hero decides to use the key to open the giant gate. The system informs that the hidden wallet of the golden key has been activated. This is the golden key of Mammon, a key that grants access to Mammon's vault. As he opens the door, the hero begins to feel astonished and realizes that there is a great treasure in the room. Walking through the corridor like Scrooge McDuck, he says that they are all incredible. Sometime later, he finds the Cursed Sword, a martial arts manual that teaches the technique of celestial demons. Additionally, there is also an ancient 8th circle magic book and even a dragon heart. Confused, he begins to question how they managed to acquire all of this. With little time left, he decides to use Journey Guide again to continue his search. However, the crystal leads him to a pile of gold that he will have to topple. After exerting great effort on all the coins like Scrooge McDuck himself, he finally finds it. This is the artifact of the god of time, the Hourglass of Kronos. At that moment, the hero understands that even if he uses the hourglass, only the user will return in time. Thus, if he returns to the demonic war, the hero realizes that he can personally climb the tower to stop the intruders. In this way, he will at least prevent the apocalypse and thus save the tower. With that, the protagonist takes the hourglass in his hands. The system notifies that the Hourglass of Kronos has been used and that time the tower is being reversed for the first time. It also warns that he has 10 minutes before all the sand runs out. With a determined look, the hero states that if he goes back in time, he will do whatever it takes to prevent this kind of thing. However, some kind of monster with multiple tentacles invades the place, and fortunately, the hero manages to dodge it. Annoyed, he wonders why this is happening now. In reality, the monster appears to have multiple serpent heads. They all go to attack the hero, but he manages to evade them. Looking to the side, he realizes that there are not only treasures in this room, but also weapons of the gods. At that moment, he grabs Zeus's thunder, Astrap. Then, not wanting to waste much time, he quickly launches an electric strike toward the monster. The monster becomes completely enraged and, however, manages to hit the hero. Annoyed, the protagonist realizes that this monster is stronger than he had imagined. However, surprisingly, a gigantic sword appears beside him. This is Leventum, the Sword of Destruction. The protagonist states that by using the weapons of the gods, no matter how strong these intruders are, he will be able to defeat them. And moreover, this sword also exists to incite chaos. Then he swings the sword, charging toward the monster. He is engulfed in flames carried by the sword, while his opponent wields some kind of dark magic. Refusing to accept his death, the hero quickly dodges all the attacks from the giant serpent. And without hesitation, he delivers a single strike to the monster, burning it forever. Analyzing the situation, he realizes that the intruders are formed by using other living creatures. Looking ahead, he notices that its main body has finally been revealed. It turns out to be a type of boar with several snakes attached to its body. The massive boar then charges forward while the hero prepares himself. Looking to the side, he spots another weapon of the gods, something very convenient. This is the Radiant Spear Bryonak. It is the weapon of the goddess of light known for piercing through everything that exists. In a magnificent scene, the hero throws the trident with all of his strength at the boar, piercing it completely. The strike was so powerful that the monster ended up exploding. And after going through all that, the protagonist remarks that it was incredibly difficult. At that moment, the system notifies that he's the first player to defeat an intruder, achieving a historic feat. At that exact moment, a device of Chronos activates as all the sand has run out. It explains that the Vault of Greed has collapsed, and that the vault no longer has an owner. At this moment, Jung is recognized as the new owner. The guild's mouth is destroyed, and the power of gluttony is granted to the player who defeated it. In shock, the hero questions what this means. Meanwhile, the system notifies that the player's causality is being reversed. All his abilities are being erased, one by one, as well as the experience he gained in the tower. Then, after all this, the system notifies that he is returning to the tutorial. Meanwhile, elsewhere in a kind of forest, several people are gathered. One of them questions what this place is, while a girl says she is sure she was at work. Suddenly, a screen appears in front of everyone. It is the system welcoming them to the tutorial. People start wondering what this tutorial actually is. With his hand on his waist, the hero questions whether he really went back to the past. Looking around, he notices that the atmosphere is chaotic, with people arguing. Suddenly, someone grabs his arm. Desperate, the man asks if the boy knows what is happening and questions what he did wrong to end up there. Upon seeing who it is, the hero realizes that he remembers this guy. This person in particular died in the tutorial, so the boy tells him to calm down. Irritated, the man asks how he could possibly calm down and explains that everyone was dragged here for no reason. He wonders aloud if this is some kind of prank and also questions where the cameras are. Analyzing the situation, the hero understands that no matter what he says, as soon as the waves begin, things will stabilize. At that moment, the system notifies that this is Chapter 1, Adaptation, and that they have only 4 minutes until the first monster wave. Upon seeing this system notification, other people begin questioning what these monsters could be. Meanwhile, the protagonist understands that everything remains the same as it was before. These are Jung's stats: Level 1, Strength 7, and Truth 9. With his hand in his pocket, the hero realizes that he didn't notice it at the time, but now he understands how serious his attributes are. However, he notices an authority of greed and of the needle, wondering what it could be. Soon he recalls when the vault was collapsing. At that moment, he understands that he can use this power as well. Without hesitation, he uses these abilities to open the Vault of Greed, obtaining the Fire Dragon's Breath, Thor's Hammer, and also the Celestial Demon martial arts. He affirms to himself that with this authority, he might have enough strength to fight. At that moment, the first monster wave begins. In shock, all the people realize that it is starting and question what they are going to do. From a distance, one of them spots some kind of animal. It is a pack of wolves. Without any hesitation, all wolves charge toward the people, who start running. However, when he moves to the other side, he realizes that there is also a pack of wolves there. Thus, the entire group ends up surrounded. One of them questions whether they are going to die there. At that moment, the hero says that if they don't want to die, they will have to fight. But a man appears, questioning if they are even aware of the situation they are in. Grabbing the boy by the collar, he demands to know how he thinks they are supposed to fight these things without any weapons. However, another person steps in, asking whether the man has a better plan. This man they trust is named Kang Hyun-chul. At this moment, Jung says it's simple and explains that while he deals with them, the others should focus on defense. The big man nods in understanding, but at the same time, questions how the boy plans to fight the wolves alone. At that moment, the protagonist retrieves the 10 Paths martial arts from the vault. Suddenly, the wolf pack charges at him. Swiftly, the hero uses the 10 Paths martial arts to counterattack. Striking one of the wolves, he sends it crashing to the ground. In a frenzy, several wolves lunge at the boy, but he prepares to fight. Quickly, the protagonist leaps and lands multiple kicks, taking down all the wolves in his path. Seeing all of this, the pack is stunned, wondering who this guy is and how he is fighting like that. Even the big man is impressed, realizing that the boy is incredibly strong. He knew the hero was hiding something and that he was fighting the wolves using only his hands. He tells himself that he feels something burning inside him. Then, as he defends against a wolf, he understands that this is neither fear nor impatience. With a furious gaze, he declares that, in fact, it is distraction. In less than a second, he grabs the wolf by the head and smashes it into the ground. Everyone is impressed by the big man as well, as he managed to defeat a wolf on his own. Stammering, one of the people wonders if they can really win, and another responds that they can because they outnumber the wolves. One of them then asks if there is anything they can use as weapons. Observing the hero carefully, he realizes that the boy doesn't have enough strength to defeat the monsters. However, in contrast, he is using his technique to land precise strikes, employing a completely different fighting style. With his body trembling, the big man declares that he wants to fight alongside this man. Shortly after, the hero finishes off all the wolves and remarks that apparently he is stuck in this place. He realizes that his body is too weak to fight the way he was used to, and that he is already exhausted after the entire battle. At that moment, some kind of spider sense activates in his brain. He wonders what this feeling is as he suddenly begins to sense the gaze of an immensely powerful presence. Just then, the system notifies that the constellation of the bent crow is watching the boy. Surprised, he looks up and realizes that this bent crow is actually the original owner of the Vault of Greed, whose name is Mammon. Shortly after, the protagonist wonders if the god or demon of greed has realized his power. He understands that if Mammon discovers that he used the items from the vault without permission, he won't stay silent. And that just the fact that he used his power without permission is already enough to warrant punishment. He realizes that he barely managed to return to the past, and now his end is already near. The system notifies that the Bent Crow has discovered distorted traces of causality surrounding him, and that the Bent Crow constellation acknowledges this and remembers the existence of the hourglass. This shocks the boy. The system also notifies that the Bent Crow, at that moment, ends up smiling. In shock, the hero realizes that the man knows he used the hourglass but has not yet reacted. He finds it suspicious that there is no reaction, but it's almost as if the fear is giving him permission. Relieved, the boy smiles and declares that if that's the case, he will use his authority. Then he chooses the mouth of gluttony, which had been subdued. The authority of gluttony is granted to the player John. At that moment, the protagonist uses his authority of gluttony. However, the system warns that the target must be designated. But looking around, Seong only sees the bodies of wolves. He targets one to use his authority. A type of demonic monster with sharp teeth emerges from his hand. They lunge for the wolf, biting into it. Then the system notifies that he has consumed a brown wolf and that the nutrients have been absorbed, increasing his strength by 1 and his agility by 2. The boy then realizes that just by consuming the bodies, his stats will increase. Confident, he thinks that if he can use his authority freely, he will be able to push his physical abilities to the limit in no time. However, he soon realizes that perhaps Beelzebub, the god of gluttony, has also noticed him. At that moment, the system notifies that the hungry prince stops chewing on a wolf's thigh and looks startled. Swallowing hard, the protagonist states that he barely escaped by luck, but Beelzebub is a powerful god demon, and he cannot rely on luck. The hungry prince opens his mouth as if he is about to say something, but instead, he simply eats more meat. Reading this, Seong understands that one of the strongest demons is hesitating because of a few pieces of meat. Smiling, he realizes that this actually works to his advantage. Using the authority of gluttony, he understands that if the demon is hungry, he will let him eat as much as he wants. Upon using his authority, several monsters begin devouring the wolves. Shortly after, the system notifies that the hungry prince celebrates the sudden feast, and the boy realizes that it worked. The nutrients have been absorbed, increasing his strength by 1 and his agility by 5. These stat increases are much lower than before, as the boy notices. However, he is not too concerned with this goal of increasing his stats for now. Steven, he asks if the demon is already full. In response, the hungry prince says that this was just an appetizer. Smiling, the hero says that this is expected and that this concludes his training. Some time passes and everyone in that place successfully defeats the wolves. At that moment, they begin celebrating such an incredible achievement. The system notifies that in the first chapter of the tutorial, adaptation has been completed and that they have successfully passed. It also informs that all participants in the wave have received 50 points. Everyone seems happy with the result. A little away from the group, the hero is also pleased because no one was injured. Unlike last time when there were some casualties and dealing with more than half of the monsters must have contributed to this outcome. Seong ranks first with 220 points, followed by Kang in second place with 80 points and Yuki in third with 40 points. Analyzing the ranking, the hero remarks that 220 points are enough. During the tutorial, individual contribution points accumulate, and the more points one has, the better the rewards for passing the tutorial. Additionally, their chances of being chosen by a constellation also increase. Seong then states that, naturally, his goal is to be in first place, and that even though they pass the first wave smoothly, one thing he has realized is that, one way or another, he will need a weapon. However, he understands that if he uses Mamma's weapon with his current stats, he will undoubtedly reach his limit, and that at this moment he needs to use weapons to compensate for his own limitations, but the problem is that there are no decent weapons in the area. In that case, he understands that he needs to search the forest for something to increase his own stats, and that with their increase he should be able to unlock better treasures from Mammon's own vault. At that moment, someone calls for the protagonist. It is a girl asking where he is going, while he himself wonders about that voice, which sounds familiar. At that moment, the boy realizes that it is Yusio, who was known as Whirlwind before the regression. Seong does not remember everyone in this place, but there is no way he would forget Yusio. She was becoming famous even in the upper floors of the tower, along with Kang, known as the Muscular Man. After all, she was one of the best in the tower. Exhausted, the girl asks the protagonist where he is going alone. However, the boy understands that every minute and second is crucial now that the tutorial has begun and he does not have time to deal with her right now. In response, he says that he is checking out the area and that standing still won't improve anything. However, the girl argues that they shouldn't be wandering around and should instead gather and first discuss how to handle the next wave. With his hand on his waist, the protagonist questions whether anything will change if they all discuss it among themselves, and she insists that it will help. Tired, the boy thinks that he does not have time for this, as it is not something he can explain in detail. Seong asks what she plans to do to ease their anxiety and states that regardless, once the second wave begins, everyone will just end up hiding again. Irritated, the woman says that even so, they do not know when those wolves might appear again, and it is dangerous for the boy to go alone. Suddenly, a screen opens in front of both of them. It is the tutorial, Chapter 1. Adaptation, informing that the remaining time until the second monster wave is only 2 hours and 57 minutes. The protagonist tells her that she should go back inside and that from now on, it is better to pay attention to the message system, and that while she waits, she can also organize the discussion or anything like that. He also says it would be better if she could give him some time to look for a strong branch or something useful. Completely ignored, the girl just remains silent. Some time passes. Already deep in the forest, the protagonist has just finished off another wolf. With his hand in his pocket, he looks around, wondering why there are so many of them. He understands that this is the perfect time to increase his own stats. Quickly, he uses the authority of gluttony to devour the fallen wolves on the ground. However, the system trolls him, stating that he can no longer absorb nutrients from the same entity. The hungry prince claims he is tired of this meat while still chewing on it. Surprised, the hero realizes that the prince has grown bored of this food. However, he remembers that this is gluttony, and it is not something he can simply transform into a monster. Praying to the sky, he asks the demon to wait a little longer, promising to find something even more delicious. At that moment, the system notifies that the hungry prince swallows the crystals whole and that his eyes are glowing. Gripping his weapon, the hero says he is going to conduct an experiment. At that moment, he uses the treasure vault of greed. Retrieving a sword, he chooses Gran. He realizes that perhaps the treasures have lost their forms, leaving only their power, and they should soon belong to him. Then he understands that if he fuses the treasure's power into a suitable item, it will basically transform into a legendary sword. At that moment, his weapon begins transforming into a legendary sword, with bolts of lightning surging from it. However, something seems to be going wrong. Quickly, the weapon evaporates from his hand. In this case, Seong was unable to withstand the power of the legendary sword, and it ended up disappearing. Soon he realizes that he managed to adapt it in some way, but if he had used something stronger, he would have been reduced to ashes. Additionally, the authority of greed cannot be used by anyone other than himself. If Cheyenne was wondering whether it was possible for others to use this power, he discovered the answer while using a useless treasure on the wolf. For now, his only option is to increase his abilities to the point where he can handle the treasures in question. After thinking this over, he realizes that there's nothing else to do for now, and he just needs to find a weapon. As he walks through the forest, he understands that he won't find anything suitable and that it would be helpful to have a guide. Seeking an easier path, he decides to open the treasure vault of greed again, retrieving the item Not Snout, which grants an excellent sense of smell to locate prey. Quickly, this item takes hold of his body. As a result, his sense of smell becomes much more acute, and upon testing it for the first time, he catches an interesting scent. Without a second thought, the hero rushes forward, thinking that the strong smell of rust confirms his suspicion. At that moment, the hungry prince starts whining about how the skin is stuck to his back. Reading this, the hero realizes that he is dealing with a pig rather than a constellation. After running like crazy, the protagonist is completely exhausted. In the distance, a wolf watches him, growling. At that moment, the hero suddenly detects another scent. Turning around, he notices the presence of a mysterious creature. It is a wolf with an extremely murderous aura and even a scar over its eye. At that moment, the hero becomes somewhat nervous, as this is a gray wolf. He considers the possibility that the wolf already knew where he was, just as he had scented him, and that before his regression, he had been too busy just running away. At that moment, a massive energy envelops the hero. He declares that this time things will be different. Quickly, the gray wolf lunges at him with full force, but the protagonist in turn manages to dodge. While doing so, he notices that the wolf, besides being larger, is also faster than a common brown wolf. Seeing that he has been wounded, he realizes that this is no ordinary monster. Analyzing the situation, he understands that the gray wolf was intelligent enough to attack his weak spot, trying to finish him off in one strike. He tells himself that if he had not materialized his martial arts, he would be covered in strawberry juice by now. Quickly, the wolf charges at him again, but the hero manages to evade once more. Standing beside the wolf, he prepares to use the 10-step reverse kick, striking it with full force. However, the kick has no effect at all. On the contrary, it only ends up hurting his own leg. Annoyed by the situation, Seong wonders if this is happening because his attributes are too low, even though he is certain that he hit the wolf's stomach. Looking closely at the area, he realizes that the beast is incredibly strong and has barely suffered a scratch. Dodging once again, he understands that he has strength and speed, but not enough to surpass the wolf. As he distances himself a bit from his opponent, he questions what he should do now. At that moment, a pack of brown wolves appears to assist the gray wolf. Backing away from his position, the hero realizes that this is bad and that he might not be able to escape this time. However, once again, fate helps him by dropping a weapon right next to him. The brown wolves charge at the hero, who in turn grabs the sword. As he strikes one of the wolves, he remarks that even though the sword is rusty, it is still quite sharp. After this strike, the brown wolf crashes hard to the ground. Smiling, the hero says that for a sword like this, it's not bad at all, and then he finishes off one of the wolves. With a determined gaze, he thinks that he has finally found the weapon he was searching for. And now that he is in this situation, he has no intention of backing down. Observing the gray wolf more closely, he tells himself that he will end this before the next wave. Quickly, he uses the domination of greed. Then he activates the Ramel family swordsmanship skill and states that from now on, things will be different. Fearless of the danger, the gray wolf becomes enraged and lunges at the hero. In a frontal attack, the hero strikes the wolf's mouth with his sword. However, the wolf manages to hold it without much difficulty. The hero then pulls the sword back and swiftly delivers multiple slashes toward the animal. These strikes are enough to severely wound it. At that moment, the protagonist realizes that it's no wonder this swordsmanship is on the same level as that of the imperial family. Without giving the beast any respite, he charges at it once more. Then he finishes off the wolf with a frontal attack. The creature growls in anger but ultimately cannot resist. At that moment, the system notifies that he has defeated the boss of the wolf forest, the Groundkeeper Wolf. It also informs that the boy has leveled up and gained 500 points of personal merit, along with the Grey Wolf's hide. Sion realizes that he is excited for another reason besides obtaining his weapon. That reason is the goal of increasing his personal merit, which can be achieved in various ways. The first method is through battles, as seen in the tutorial's monster network. The second method is by encountering and defeating a monster in isolation. The third method is a bit more brutal, requiring him to defeat other players. This won't happen now, but by the end of the tutorial, the number of players drawing their swords against each other will increase dramatically. He understands that this is the easiest and fastest way to gain personal merit. Using the authority of gluttony, he absorbs the Groundkeeper Wolf. Absorbing its nutrients, he gains 3 in strength, 5 in agility, and 2 in vitality. At that moment, the hungry prince expresses his satisfaction with the meat, saying he expected nothing less. Before leaving, Sion decides to check his items. He now possesses the Forgotten Hero's sword, a long sword of category B, with a poison skill, and a hero trait that increases attack power by 10%. Additionally, he has the Grey Wolf's hide, which grants charisma and the ability to instill fear in enemies, as well as the Blessing of the Wind, which increases speed by 5%. The protagonist realizes that if he handles this correctly, he might even manage to evolve to Class D. Suddenly, the bent crow stares at the Forgotten Hero's sword apprehensively, commenting that the hero is not so bad after all. Completely changing his expression, Sion wonders how much time remains until the next wave. Opening the information screen, the system notifies that he has only 12 minutes left. Donning the Grey Wolf's hide as a cloak, the protagonist declares that he must hurry. 12 minutes later, the second monster wave begins, and the system notifies that people must stop the wave and prove their worth. As he walks through the forest, the hero remembers that he promised Yusu he would return before the second wave started. But he quickly dismisses the thought, understanding that this is a great opportunity to see how the others will react. With a serious expression, he states that he has no intention of dragging along some fools who only know how to cry and get in the way. Upon arriving at the scene, he sees several people fighting against an army of wild boars. One of the men questions what his colleague is doing, explaining that he must not run away. Meanwhile, the muscular man and the girl continue fighting against the boars without any trouble. Watching everything from a distance, the protagonist understands that it has finally begun. A crow among the crowd starts squawking, telling someone not to dodge but to block. It then questions a blonde-haired man about what he is doing, commenting that he used to work in his company. Kicking, the boy states that he should fight properly if he doesn't want to be fired. Hiding in the bushes, the hero realizes that there are always useless people everywhere. Looking at the others, he notices that they are fighting better than he expected, especially Kang and Yuxio. And considering that they don't have their own equipment, both of them are doing quite well. Walking like a boss, the protagonist declares that now it's time to step in. After defeating the boars, the girl thinks that if she hadn't held onto that boy, she would never have been able to do anything. Suddenly, one of the boars wakes up and charges toward her. Quickly, the woman manages to dodge. But looking at the ground, she realizes that she is bleeding. At that moment, the boy's words echo in her mind. Meanwhile, a fierce boar continues running, ready to finish its target. In an instant, she regains her courage, telling herself that she just needs to hold on a little longer. At that moment, the protagonist appears and finishes off the boar, saving her. She is in shock at what she just witnessed. The hero then explains to her that they first need to deal with the boars that are still coming. With that, he opens the vault to retrieve the tendons of the superior orcs. Upon maxing out his ability, his body gains much more muscle fiber. As he prepares to counterattack, he realizes that his body might not be able to handle this. Quickly, the boy dodges with immense agility. Then, in midair, he prepares to finish his opponent with a single sword strike, and does so. But after defeating it, two more boars continue charging at him. With just one movement of his sword, the protagonist manages to dodge multiple attacks from both boars. Both the girl and the muscular man are in shock as they witness this impressive scene. Confident, the boy wonders if this was thanks to the orc tendons and realizes that he definitely feels stronger. Placing his hand on his shoulder, the bald man calls his attention, saying that he fights very well. Pointing to his employees, he comments that the boy is on a completely different level than those useless people. At that moment, the bald man makes an offer to the protagonist, asking him to become his personal bodyguard. He introduces himself as the CEO of Rowan Corporation. He says that if they make it back, he will reward him generously, and then asks how much the kid wants. A bit flustered, he also says that he will offer him a department head position in his company. Smiling, the boy says that it sounds good, while the old man begins to celebrate. However, the protagonist states that he was actually looking for a good meat shield, leaving the bald man confused. Without hesitation, the hero simply kicks the fat old man to the ground. Lying down, the bald man questions what he is doing and asks if he has lost his mind. However, the boy says that since the man is big, he can take care of the creatures coming their way. Looking behind him, the man finally notices the presence of multiple boars charging at him. Thus, the man ends up being completely trampled by the boars while the protagonist appears unfazed. Meanwhile, the girl seems apprehensive about what she just witnessed. The bent crow watches the scene with a smirk, while the hungry prince whines for more delicious prey. Sometime later, everyone has rested after defeating the wild boars. With that, the second wave is successfully concluded. It is notified that all participants receive 50 points and that individual scores are being distributed, causing everyone to celebrate. In first place is Zhang with 1080 points, in second is Kang with 180, and in third is Yuxiu with 100. At that moment, it is revealed that he consumed the brown boar, absorbing its nutrients and increasing his strength by 1 and his vitality by 2. Meanwhile, the hungry prince devours the boars, savoring them and eagerly awaiting more food. Looking at the finished boar, the boy thinks that he will keep it for food, and that before his regression, all he ate was wolf meat, so he knows just how bad poorly prepared meat tastes. Preparing his meal, he comments that the rust in the mud doesn't bother him, but that he shouldn't worry about it now because he is starving. Suddenly, someone approaches, wanting to talk to the protagonist. It is a girl asking if she can help. With her hands injured, she explains that she used to run a restaurant and knows a few things about meat. At that moment, the hero realizes that she must be a chef and decides to let her handle it. Looking around, he notices a crowd of people offering to help in various ways. One of them asks how they will manage to start a fire. In response, the blonde man says that he hadn't thought about that. However, the hero ends up opening the Vault of Greed and retrieving the hunting ember to assist. Shortly after, the fire is successfully started for cooking the food. Meanwhile, the hungry prince licks his lips, sensing a delicious smell. Wary, the hero simply tells himself that he also needs to eat. Sio approaches, offering the boy some water, which he accepts. Looking at his sword, she asks if he found it in the forest. Analyzing the girl's weapon, the boy thinks she must be feeling jealous. Changing the subject, he asks if she sees the message extending and floating. Looking at the ranking, the girl notices she has 100 points and asks what that means. In response, the protagonist explains that with that amount, she could buy a sword, and that by focusing on the points, the shop menu will appear. Impressed, the girl comments that this feels like some kind of game. With his arms crossed, Seong says that to survive here, it's best to adapt quickly to this system. After browsing the menu for a bit, Siu chooses a sword. At that very moment, the sword drops in front of her. Smiling, she asks how he discovered this, and he replies that he simply adapted quickly to the situation. Sio says she can't keep up with him and calls him by his first name, which makes him curious. Explaining, the girl says that someone told her to get used to the system. Then she thanks him for letting her know. She states that she looks forward to working with him from now on. At dawn, the system notifies that there are 58 minutes left until the third monster wave. Sio then asks if everyone is ready, and one of them questions what they should do now. The girl suggests that they gather some stones to throw and provide support from behind. Analyzing the whole scenario, Seong realizes that things have changed compared to before, and that it might be because of Sio, since having someone in command helps reduce panic. He affirms that this is good because this way he can focus on the hidden piece. With that, he opens the vault again to retrieve the blue mana circle. This is the most basic element obtained for mages to use their own magic. However, this mana circle is known to be less efficient than those of the 7 towers. But in any case, there are always various training methods available. First, you must establish a foundation with the blue towers method, and after that, build pillars on the foundation using a more advanced method. Additionally, he cannot forget about the Dantian either. Focusing, the hero states that he can draw mana through the mana circle, but this is merely a training method for magic. He thinks that for martial artists, he needs to refine his Dantian whenever he gets the chance. While meditating, he thinks of it as following a river and consults the Blue Tower's notes regarding its knowledge of Mammon's treasure. Concentrating fully, he affirms that he can feel the energy flowing through his lungs, and that by being careful he can reach the energy trapped within him. As he wonders if this energy will merge with his own body, in a short time it consolidates in his heart. The system then notifies that the first mana circle has been successfully created using the blue training method, and that as a result, drawing mana and using magic is now possible. It concludes that he has reached extraordinary spellcasting and that as a reward he has received 1,000 points. The constellation 3 images of turned backs watches with wide eyes. Meanwhile, the most celestial constellation displays an expression of admiration. Nervous, he realizes that several divinities related to magic are showing interest in him. For now, only Mammon and Beelzebub are by his side, but he is not exactly their apostle. And in terms of ranking, both of these gods are by far more dangerous than the constellations that have appeared so far. At that moment, the hungry prince seems upset, saying that more guests have arrived, while the bent crow furrows his brow and retrieves a treasure from the vault. The distorted action of the bent crow catches the protagonist's attention. The crow has blocked all communications with lower-ranking constellations. Impressed, the hero understands that even for a high rank, interfering with the system this way requires great effort. At that moment, the hungry prince feels relieved as he watches the guests disappear, while the crow silently observes the boy. Then the hero realizes that his focus now must be returning to his own mana refinement, and that despite its low efficiency, the Blue Tower's training method is clearly strengthening his mana circle. At that moment, someone approaches the boy, asking if he is sleeping and questioning what kind of person sleeps sitting up. The man then tells him to get up quickly because only 12 minutes remain. Opening his eyes, the protagonist is shocked, wondering why this guy is here. The blonde man comments that he hasn't moved for an hour, while the hero questions why that matters. Then the laid-back man says that he's being too cold and that everyone is in the same situation. The hero remembers that this guy's name is Park, a worthless person who tormented the weak and stole food before the regression. However, analyzing the situation, he notices that things are different now, likely due to the changes he made. As he stands up, he recalls that Park has always been this way, strong against the weak and weak against the strong. Then the shameless man says he just wants to be his friend and points out that, as it seems, the hero doesn't have any close friends yet. John vividly remembers the hardships this guy caused him and how he was even pushed into the forest. However, thanks to that, he was able to realize the power of the journey guide, which was just a result of those events. The hero then comments that the man is quick on his feet, while the blonde man questions why he's asking that. Stepping closer to the bully, the protagonist tells him that he needs to act as bait. At that moment, the system notifies that the third wave is about to begin. Everyone in the crowd prepares to fight for their lives. Seo slowly realizes that the monsters are approaching. The monsters in question are a group of monkeys wielding Paleolithic-era weapons. The group of humans uses their spears to strike the monkeys with full force. One of the men comments that there are too many creatures and asks what they should do now. Frustrated, the girl realizes that at this rate, their formation will collapse. Everyone continues fighting against the monkeys, struggling for survival. Seo then tells the bully to start now while he stands there trembling. Without hesitation, the protagonist simply kicks him, telling him to go now. The monkeys then turn around, noticing that someone has fallen to the ground. With eyes full of hunger for their prey, the group begins focusing their attention on the blonde man. At that moment, Park starts running in desperation, with the entire horde of monkeys chasing after him. Watching all of this calmly, the hero simply thinks that Park is faster than expected. At that moment, the bully calls out to the protagonist for help, saying that he can't take it anymore. Seo then tells him to come to him. Focusing, he begins using some kind of magic while telling the man not to get hit. Worried, the bully doesn't understand what he means by that. The boy starts using the fireball spell that was in the Vault of Greed, and without a second thought, he launches it toward the group of monkeys. As he runs frantically, the bully notices a fireball approaching his face. By reflex, he leaps with all his might to avoid being roasted. Irritated, he questions what the boy just did and asks what kind of magic that was. Everyone around comments that this seems like something out of a fantasy novel and wonders if they can use magic as well. Looking at the crowd, the hero understands that they should be able to handle the rest, and that if they don't keep fighting, they will never gain experience. And he realizes that points can also be obtained outside of this battle. Using his authority of gluttony, he absorbs nutrients, increasing his agility by 3. The hungry prince then states that he is satisfied with the well-done meat. But looking at the ground, Park says that he will serve the protagonist for the rest of his life. Turning away, the hero simply says that's good, and that he should take the opportunity to eat some bananas. Meanwhile, in another location, several boars are beginning to dig into the ground. Suddenly, the hero arrives and swiftly finishes off all the creatures in the area. Sidong levels up, reaching level 3. The system then notifies that he has successfully passed the third wave and that all participants have received 50 points. Looking at the menu, the boy understands that the main mission has also ended. This means that people's determination has changed, as he thought it would take another 10 minutes. At that moment, a giant boar appears before him. It is the boss of Boar Hill, the burrowing boar. Using his usual tricks, the protagonist opens the Vault of Greed and retrieves the wiring. Striking a heroic pose, he prepares to finish the boss. With just a single strike, he unleashes an immortal attack on the monster, defeating it instantly. As a result, he earns 500 personal merit points and also obtains the giant boar's fang. The hero realizes that unlike the gray wolf's hide, which was like a hood, this item is just a raw material. Since it cannot be used without being processed, he simply stores it in his inventory. Suddenly, a pillar of light appears beside him, revealing the forgotten hero's tool. Confused, Xion wonders if this is what the boar was trying to bury, and whether it has any connection to the forgotten hero's sword. However, he states that he will only be able to find out by using it. Sometime later, he returns to the village that is forming and sees many injured people. Looking around, he declares that this place is excellent. At that moment, he uses the forgotten hero's tool and the forgotten hero's sword as well. He also opens the Vault of Greed to retrieve the introduction to the Black Rock Forge. Despite his confidence, he remembers that before the regression, he had never sharpened a sword. A bald man then appears, saying that it's impressive since very few heroes are capable of sharpening a sword manually. Surprised, the protagonist asks if he can sharpen stones, and the bald man replies that he can. Analyzing the material, he questions where the boy managed to find something like this, and the boy simply says it was luck. The man states that the sword is old and rusty but still good, and that the balance is well maintained because the sword is not too damaged. Analyzing the situation, the protagonist wonders why someone like this is here and realizes that even sharpening a sword requires a master's touch. The blacksmith is so skilled that in a short time, the protagonist can already see his own reflection in the sword's blade. At that moment, he simply tosses the sword back to the protagonist. Testing it a little, the hero notices that it feels different, with a sharper edge than before. This is the forgotten hero's sword, which now has a sharpening effect of over 20% and increases attack against monsters by 15%. The blacksmith explains that although a sword seems simple, it is delicate, and sharpening something past its prime is a refreshing experience. Seeing the boar's fang and the gray wolf's hide, the bald man asks if he can work on them as well. At that moment, the Golden Crown Soldier shows interest in the player Gushang Xiak. The hero then recalls who the Golden Crown Soldier is. He is one of the 72 demon lords under the command of the 7 deadly sins, also known as the 28th demon lord Beres. He mentions that while some believe Beres is a war fanatic due to his appearance atop a red horse, in reality he is skilled in alchemy. His craftsmanship with iron rivals that of Hephaestus. However, while Hephaestus valued balance, Beres focused solely on destruction. His weapons were so powerful that even the gods coveted them. Reading this information, the bald man wonders what it all means. In response, the hero explains that it's a constellation, leaving the old man even more confused. Xiong then clarifies that constellations are divine beings that reside at the top of the tower, while the blacksmith questions why a god would be interested in him. Curious, he asks how the Guardian knows this, and the Guardian replies that he is simply receiving attention from a constellation. The bald man asks if he needs to do anything, and the hero tells him to just continue doing what he was before because they are not dangerous. He even comments that receiving their attention can be very beneficial. He explains that this is how he learned to manipulate fire. The blacksmith then says that this is tempting, showing immense interest. Lighting his hand with fire, Xion gently tells him to keep supporting him. He states that the blacksmith is more valuable doing this than fighting a monster with wooden sticks. The hero understands that having a master to maintain his equipment is a great advantage, and that he won't have to worry about it in the future. At that moment, the system notifies that there are only 3 hours and 21 minutes left until the next monster wave. Opening the Vault of Greed once more, the hero uses the 3 talents ability. While meditating, he thinks that he has already created a mana circle, and that the next step is the Dantian. The mana circle was not created in the heart, but the Dantian is something that must be opened in the lower abdomen. He states that he must guide it to open by itself and move it. The Dantian is successfully opened, and the hero's visibility of the 3 talents increases. With this, he can now manipulate internal energy, and the efficiency of martial arts will grow with his level of internal energy. As if that weren't enough, the protagonist also receives a reward of 1,000 points. Exhausted, he remembers that only 1 hour remains until the next wave. At that moment, the blacksmith approaches, showing that the hero's sword is ready. As he stands up, the hero comments that this was faster than he expected. The blacksmith then says that he would have liked to find a refining agent, but it was easier to do it there. He then reveals the completely revitalized Grey Wolf's hide, along with the Fang dagger. He asks if the protagonist likes it, and the boy replies that he loves it. He realizes that it's incredible to craft an item without any tools, and that this is expected from someone who has caught Bear's attention. After getting dressed, he realizes that the man crafted it using the leftover leather, so he thanks him. Then he suggests to the blacksmith that he avoid direct combat and focus only on maintaining equipment on the battlefield, to which the blacksmith agrees. Only 57 minutes remain until the 4th wave, and at this moment, the protagonist thinks that the next one will be even worse. Meanwhile, at the camp, the girl says that according to Mr. Xiong, this wave will be very dangerous and that they must not lose focus. One of the group members says that even if it's dangerous, they should still be able to handle it. Looking around, the girl realizes that everyone seems too relaxed, which is a bad sign. Suddenly, Kang arrives at the scene, smashing the ground with full force. With a murderous expression, the muscular man warns everyone to be silent. The entire rowdy group immediately falls silent. At this moment, the leader in charge comments that only 1 minute remains, then thanks Mr. Kang, calling him by name. Then the system notifies that the fourth wave has begun. Several white wolves appear at the site. It is an enormous pack and people question why they are so large. Park asks if this is supposed to be happening and wonders why these creatures are so gigantic. Observing them, he realizes that he has made that same expression before when facing creatures of this size. However, he notices that the muscular man and the girl are completely different people. Then he orders the blonde man to talk less and run more. He asks if he has any objections and the blonde man simply obeys. As he runs, the pack starts chasing its prey. The man is completely desperate. As Seong prepares to use his fireball spell, he launches it at the bully without even warning him. After the explosion takes out the wolves, the hungry prince quickly grabs his utensils, eagerly awaiting the barbecue. However, one of the wolves manages to survive. Drawing his sword from its sheath, the hero warns that it's an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Opening the vault of greed, he retrieves the blood wolf's swordsmanship, and with a murderous aura, charges at his opponent. Using the first form of blood wolf's swordsmanship, he defeats it with a single strike. He realizes that his dantian is now open, making his martial arts even stronger. Several wolves in the pack are still eager to take down the hero. He announces that the first form of blood wolf swordsmanship has been enhanced using internal energy. At that moment, the hero becomes even more overpowered, delivering multiple strikes simultaneously at the wolf pack. It is a completely one-sided battle, defeating them in mere seconds. In shock, Park questions if this is even the same man. Using the authority of gluttony, the hero consumes the gray wolf, absorbing its nutrients to increase his strength by 1 and agility by 3. At that moment, the hungry prince opens his mouth wide to eat. Frightened, the bully asks Hung if he can't help the others. The rest are struggling against the wolves except for Kang and the girl, who are performing much better. However, the bully is already getting exhausted, unable to keep up with the wolves' movements. In contrast, Yu shows no weakness, taking down the wolves with ease. At that moment, the crowned spider constellation starts watching Yusu's swordsmanship with great interest. The hero understands that this spider is one of the best among the 72 demon lords, and also that this constellation is the master of natural swordsmanship, interested in anything related to the art. Then, the constellation announces its desire to evaluate Yusu's potential, catching her attention. Without losing focus, the girl continues striking down the wolves with precision. Remembering the past, Seong recalls that her sword speed was unparalleled, and even wielding only one sword, it looked as if she was striking with multiple blades at once. He remembers that this is the power of Bao, and that it is testing whether Yusu is worthy of its strength. As the girl wipes out all her opponents, one of the men stammers while hearing Seong say that this is their chance. Then the system notifies that the spider appears genuinely happy to witness all of this. It also announces that the fourth wave has been successfully completed, and that all participants will be rewarded with 10 points. Seong ranks first with 4,920 points, Yusu with 900 and Kang with 580. After defeating so many monsters, the girl feels an overwhelming exhaustion, collapsing toward the ground. However, the hero catches her in his arms as if he were some kind of knight. A man suffers a severe leg injury, and at that moment, the blonde woman asks if there are any nurses or doctors nearby. A man appears, saying that he can't do anything without the proper equipment. Everyone turns around with a crazed expression. They say that if that guy had helped, things would have been different, but he just stood there watching without lifting a single finger. At that moment, the protagonist approaches while the other man questions what he is trying to do. However, Seong simply tells him to move aside. At that instant, the hero opens the Vault of Greed and uses the healing light. Quickly, the wounded man's injury begins to heal. The blue-haired woman then asks if the protagonist can help in another area as well. He explains that he can't give too much, and she says she will gather only those in critical condition. Sometime later, alone, the hero understands that this is more than enough, beyond what he expected. Suddenly, he senses the presence of Kang and the big man approaching. Not understanding anything, the protagonist asks what he wants. Answering directly, the man simply says that they should fight. Smiling, the hero thinks that this is something typical of Kang, and that if he wanted to talk to him, he would have to break his spirit first. Then the muscular man tells the hero that he should take up his weapon and use magic as well. Quickly, the protagonist explains that he doesn't need to, which irritates the man even more. At that moment, the hero states that Kang must defeat him with bare hands first if he wants him to use a weapon. Without hesitation, Kang accepts and charges at the hero with full force. He attempts to land a frontal strike, but the protagonist manages to dodge. Analyzing the situation, Seong realizes that the man's attacks are powerful, but that his defense has openings. Displaying immense agility, he tries to land a kick on his opponent, but Kang blocks it with his leg. The protagonist then understands that, at the very least, Kang's equipment is impressive. Counterattacking, the man tries to hit him again, but once more, the hero dodges. Thinking to himself, he realizes that there's no way he can handle Kang barehanded in his current state. At that moment, he resorts to Tai Chi, a martial art developed in southern Chinese schools. Meanwhile, the big man prepares to strike the protagonist, nearly bursting with rage. However, the boy manages to block with an open palm, and using both open hands, he redirects his strike, sending the big man flying backward. The impact is so strong that Kang crashes hard against a tree, but he doesn't give up and charges at the boy once more. Still analyzing the situation, Seong understands that in terms of pure strength, Kang is one step ahead. However, the secret of Tai Chi is not brute force, but rather controlling the energy of the surroundings with one's will. Additionally, an attack relying solely on strength against Tai Chi only ends up harming the attacker. After landing another strike and sending the man crashing into a tree, the tree itself splits in half. As a result, the man injures his shoulder and finally acknowledges his own defeat. Displaying humility, Seong approaches and uses his healing magic on Kang's shoulder. He explains that he doesn't need to rush since he is already strong enough. Extending his hand, he invites Kang to train twice a day. Without hesitation, the muscular man shakes Seong's hand and accepts the proposal. The Crocodile-verse constellation watches Kang attentively. Seeing this, the hero realizes that apparently Kang has finally attracted the attention of the constellation. Sometime later, the fifth wave begins. With his arms crossed, the protagonist notices that the entire group's attitude has changed significantly. Previously, they had faced wolves and monkeys, so he quickly wonders what will come next. And apparently, it's a group of much wilder and more aggressive boars. Yusu orders everyone to grip their weapons firmly. Then she asks what exactly they are dealing with. However, the hero says that this time the boy should sit out. He thinks about how he had been holding back and handling most of the enemies to help the others, but apparently that is no longer necessary. And besides, everyone has gained their own points to survive. At that exact moment, the girl is handling one of the giant boars alone. The same goes for Kang and Sue, who managed to lift a giant boar using pure strength alone. At that moment, the hero realizes that they are using the Tai Chi technique. Analyzing the entire situation, he declares that he doesn't even need to intervene anymore. Then his companion asks where he is going and states that he wants to go too. However, the hero explains that he doesn't need to as he is going to climb the mountain. Then he points toward a massive rocky mountain that resembles Mount Everest. Trembling in fear, the bully simply wishes him a safe journey and says he will take care of the camp. Sometime later, the hero walks calmly through the mountain, near a group of monkeys. One of the monkeys, without hesitation, jumps with full force to attack the protagonist, but ends up going to the sky quickly with just one strike of his sword. The hungry prince then complains, saying that he is still hungry. At that moment, the hero realizes that taking care of him is like taking care of a child or even a hungry pet. Then he explains to the entity that it should not worry, as he intends to give it something much tastier at the top of the mountain. He remembers that before the regression, he would not have dared to come here. But now, with the Vault of Greed open, everything is different. At that moment, he grabs the cliff monkey. He states that with this power, he will be able to climb easily. Ripping the rocks, the hero climbs without any fear. Because with this ability, he knows where to place his hands and how to handle the wind, having the instincts of a monkey. And that without this strength, he would have fallen a long time ago. Curious, a hungry prince asks where there is food in a place like this. Then the hero says that it is about time for something to appear. Looking at a branch, he says that he has finally found it. However, when he looks to the side, he notices a group of completely frightened monkeys. They become very skittish and start screaming. One of them ends up throwing a rock at the hero, which irritates him. He jumps off the cliff using his dagger to hold on tightly. However, upon looking closely at one of the rocks, he realizes that there is a cave there, which must be used by the monkeys. Without thinking twice, he simply uses his fire ability on the monkeys, making them all fall from the mountain instantly. Upon entering the cave, he realizes that, as expected, it connects to the top of the mountain. Upon reaching the top, he notices the presence of an albino monkey holding a staff. Curious, the protagonist asks if, by any chance, it is the leader. He also says that it is not as if the monkey were Sion. At that moment, the hero remembers the great and wise constellation and thinks about the possibility that this tower was designed to imitate it. But he quickly changes his mind as it does not even come close to the real one. Using his sword, he manages to block the albino monkey's attack. With a confident expression, he states that this is a real fight. The albino monkey is very agile with a staff, but the boy barely manages to dodge. The boy realizes that for a boss monster in a tutorial map, its skills are quite impressive, and that if he continues only defending, he will be at a great disadvantage. With that, the hero ends up retreating and sheathing his sword. However, charging forward, he states that he needs to attack while minimizing the damage he takes. At that moment, he manages to grab the monkey's staff, leaving it in complete fury. However, the staff itself is sturdy, not allowing him to do much. Using his strength, he rips the staff from the albino monkey's grasp. As he holds it, he realizes that it is heavier than he expected. With that, the monkey's aura changes completely. The system notifies that the boy has unlocked a treasure from the Vault of Greed. This is the weak sex staff technique, a technique created to ward off those who threaten the poor. The albino monkey becomes both angry and confused. Responding in the language of the monkeys, the protagonist simply says that this is not going to happen. Then, with just one strike to the monkey's head, he makes it faint. At that moment, the system announces that the boss monster of Stone Mountain, the cliff-climbing monkey, has been defeated. His level has increased, along with his contribution points, reaching up to 1,000 points, and he has obtained the Stone Mountain monkey's mineral stone. Interested, the hero says that he will deliver it to the elder later. At that moment, he uses his authority of gluttony to consume the cliff-climbing monkey. This way, he absorbs the nutrients, increasing his agility by 5 and his intelligence by 5 as well. The boy understands that gaining 10 points at once is thanks to greed, and that this devouring ability is incredibly good. Looking to the side, he says that now he will check on that monkey that was hiding. At that moment, he approaches the cave and enters. The system notifies that he has discovered a hidden dungeon, the training grounds of the forgotten hero. Nervous, the hero realizes that this is a dungeon from the first chapter of the tutorial, something impossible, because in a dungeon, it is possible to gain incredible rewards, especially when one is the first to complete it, as the rewards are always 1,000 times better than later. So he states that there is no reason to hesitate after having reached this place. At that moment, the system notifies that he has unlocked the Vault of Greed and the Order of the Night Owl. With this ability, he can see completely in a dark place. As he descends the stairs, the hero realizes that from the entrance to this point, a great descent begins and that this cave is inside the mountain. Sometime later, the hero arrives at a place that looks incredible. He notices that the walls and floor are covered with slash marks and then sees swords. Then he understands that this place truly lives up to the name of a training ground. Looking more closely, he notices something very strange on the wall. It is something that is part of the Forgotten Hero's sword mission. Without thinking twice, the hero thrusts the sword into the lock and uses it as a kind of key. Then the system notifies that he has received the right to challenge the Forgotten Hero. The hero in question appears to be asleep in some corner of the cave. Quickly, he rises, appearing like a kind of hologram or ghost. Nervous, the protagonist realizes that the fight has already begun. As he pulls his sword, he understands that it is not coming out of the lock at all. The system notifies that the judgment of the Forgotten Hero has begun and that only the broken sword in the chamber can be used, no other weapon. And that as soon as he grabs the broken sword, the duel with the Forgotten Hero will begin. Quickly, the ghostly Forgotten Hero charges at the boy, making a strong vertical attack with his sword, but the protagonist barely manages to dodge. The Forgotten Hero says that it has been a long time since someone challenged him. Surprised, Seong asks if there were challengers before him. Responding, the man says yes, but a long time ago. Smiling, the boy says that since the man is still there, then he must have failed. This continues in a frantic sword fight until the hero's sword ends up breaking. Smiling, the man says that he was right. Quickly, the hero grabs one of the other swords stuck in the ground to defend himself. However, the Forgotten Hero charges at him again to attack. The ghost says that his reactions are decent, but his movements are slow and awkward. He explains that the boy has experience, but his body cannot keep up. At that moment, the protagonist understands that the ghost discovered this after only crossing swords a few times. Confused, the boy questions what the ghost intends with this judgment. At that moment, the ghost says he is impressed that the boy noticed the energy sword. Uneasy, the protagonist understands that this is why no one has managed to pass the judgment, as finding this place is already nearly impossible. Looking at the hero seriously, the ghost warns that if the boy cannot overcome this, it is better to stop here. Without thinking twice, Seong pushes forward toward his opponent. He seems completely different, with much more precise and faster movements. Surprised, the Forgotten Hero asks how long he intends to keep just dodging. Seong thinks that he is right because against normal monsters, it is enough to figure out their patterns, but against him, it is not. Then he affirms to himself that he cannot just dodge or block, leaving him with the option to open the Vault of Greed to use the Teiji sword. At that moment, the ghost charges forward with full force to defeat the hero, but his attack ends up being blocked. Then he realizes that the sword he is using ends up cracking, so he discards it. He says that the hero's movement was not enough, but soon notices that he is getting closer. The protagonist has his eyes completely focused, prepared to finish his opponent. With that, he uses the third stance of the Blood Wolf sword technique, executing the Blood Wolf strike. This attack is strong enough to shatter the man's sword, who admits that it is impressive. The Forgotten Hero says that such a technique would be impossible without great experience. Soon he thinks that the boy must be hiding his strength because he sees no signs that he has learned the soft sword technique. The hero understands that this is obvious because he opened the treasure vault and gained that power just moments ago. Looking at the sword beside him, he wonders how this judgment ends. Responding, the man says that naturally he has passed as he managed to disarm him. He also says that with this level of potential, he doubts that anyone will ever be able to take the sword from the boy. Looking back, the hero understands that this must be the power the Forgotten Hero has been waiting for all this time. At that moment, he approaches the lock to claim his reward. Then the ghost tells him to endure, as the sword is recognizing him as its owner. Surprised by what the man said, the protagonist thinks that it must be at least an A-rank weapon. Thinking this, he puts in all of his strength to pull it out. He tells himself that it is best to grit his teeth and endure until the end. With that, he ends up spitting out his strawberry juice from his mouth due to the sheer effort he is making. And after some time, he finally manages to pull out the brand new sword. Looking at it carefully, he understands that this is the true form of the forgotten hero's sword. Smiling, the Coast says that it looks like he will have trouble with it for now, but he should overcome it soon. Disappearing completely, he says that he hopes to see him show something even better in the future. At that moment, a notification appears stating that he has conquered the secret dungeon, the training grounds of the forgotten hero. Additionally, it informs him that he has leveled up, achieving a historic feat, and that, as a reward, his personal contribution points have increased by 20,000. Impressed by the boy's achievement, the bent crow ends up jumping from his own seat. A short time later, they are notified that the 6th wave is beginning and that they must stop the wave of monsters and prove their worth. The leader tells everyone to maintain formation since they have the advantage and nothing to fear. Kang, meanwhile, is fighting the monsters with his bare hands. Pulling her cape, the girl says that the protagonist has been missing for a while and asks if something happened to him. Kang remains silent, completely ignoring her. She says that she cannot wait any longer to look for the boy and asks if the muscular man will come with her. Replying, the man says that it will not be necessary at all. Shocked, the heroine asks if he is not worried, since without one of them, they would have already lost. Arms crossed, the muscular man explains that the guy is not weak enough for people to need to worry about him. Seeing the screen displaying 28,000 points, both are impressed, and Kang comments that he is probably doing something they cannot even imagine. Completely astonished by what she just saw, the girl simply agrees. A short time later, the hero ends up waking up already on the cave floor. He feels a very strong pain in his chest. He wonders if this is the cause after drawing the sword and understands that all his internal and human energy was drained at once. Looking to the side, he realizes that he is eager to unleash the sword, but needs to replenish his dantian. With that, he decides to meditate to restore all his chi or internal chakra, for example. However, at that moment, he starts noticing something strange happening. Looking back, he sees a kind of gigantic energy pillar. He is notified that he has unlocked the Vault of Greed, gaining the Black Mana Circle. Additionally, he received the boundary-breaking heart technique, a secret heart technique passed down for generations in the Manga clan. After receiving his reward, the hero continues meditating without any problem. The system announces that everyone has successfully passed through the 6th, 7th, and 8th waves. With that, he realizes that at least a day has passed since he left the camp and feels relieved to see that everyone managed to hold their ground without him. But he remembers the final challenge of Tutorial Chapter 1, the 10th wave. And as expected in the last wave, the level of the monsters will increase brutally. As he stands up, he understands that, apparently, he will have to prove his worth at the camp for some time. The system notifies him that he has successfully accumulated internal energy in his dantian, and that all martial arts he uses will receive a boost. Seeing his magic grow so much, he thinks that evolving this much in less than 2 days is insane. At that moment, he obtains the rock-splitting sword, Durandian of Salada, a B-rank sword. Impressed, the hero says that he cannot believe that this sword was lying dormant in the first chapter of the tutorial, something quite surprising. And that, even before his regression, the sword was just a rumor, as no one had ever found it. Sean comments that the reason his amulet was completely shattered must be because his power is not sufficient. At that moment, the system notifies that the time remaining until the 9th wave is only 24 minutes. The hero understands that he needs to hurry, so he rushes out of the cave. Meanwhile, the entire group is fighting against red monkeys. One of the women asks about the wounded, while another says that they do not have time to worry about that. Quickly, a monkey charges forward to attack a girl, but the fierce one arrives to defeat it with ease. The crowned spider constellation corrects the player's stance, saying that her movements are dull. Panting, she realizes that from the 7th wave onward, the monsters have become much stronger. At that moment, a red monkey tries to attack her from behind, but she notices that her arm does not move at all. Kang then pulls the entire ground with force, completely shattering it. The girl falls to the ground and simply thanks him, while he tells her to take deep breaths for now. She asks about the wounded, and the muscular man says that if she falls while protecting them, the entire camp will be destroyed. However, the heroine notices that Kang is also exhausted and states that if that guy doesn't show up, they are doomed. At that moment, Park arrives running, holding a banana, saying that they have reached their limit and can't hold on any longer. At the same instant, she ends up tripping on the ground, dropping the bananas while a monkey rushes in to finish her off. Suddenly, all the monkeys are struck by a powerful electric shock. The crowned spider constellation bows to the demon god. Meanwhile, the old woman riding the crocodile constellation also bows to the demon god. It is the protagonist who is using his lightning magic, frightening all the red-haired monkeys. Upon seeing the hero, Park starts tearing up with joy. At that moment, the protagonist is using lightning chain to attack all his opponents. Looking around, he thinks that Yusiu and Kang held their ground well, but wonders what Park is doing among them. At that moment, the donkey-headed thief constellation laughs and points at the player Park. Many people start to be impressed by the magic and by the hero's arrival. They then announce that he is the Blood Wolf. However, the boy is extremely confused by this nickname. The bully then asks if he likes the title that he himself gave him. Excited, He says that the smell of red juice spreads every time the sword is swung while wearing a wolf fur cape. Upon hearing this, the hero becomes extremely irritated, as a player's title is very important, and it was given by a bully like him. The system notifies that they have successfully passed the 9th wave. Seong ends up in first place with 41,000 points, Yu with 4,800, and Kang with 4,700. At that moment, the duo in question runs toward the protagonist. Nervous, the girl says she was worried and asks where he was. The hero says he will explain later and that for now, she should focus on taking care of the camp as a whole. The girl then says she agrees but insists that he must explain everything later. The hero feels relieved because for now, Siu is the leader of the place. Suddenly, the muscular man approaches, commenting that the girl has gotten stronger than before. The redhead tells them to meet later near the old broken tree. Confused, the boy wonders if he is challenging him to a duel. At that moment, Valenthan approaches. Seong tells him to report the situation, and he says that after he went to the Rocky Mountain, the 6th wave ended without any problems. While he speaks, the hero wonders if he had noticed that this guy had developed this talent, because he remembered him being dead weight before his return, but now his memories and skills in the report are quite competent. He thinks that apparently he has caught the attention of the rank 6 Demon Lord Balfour. Continuing the report, Valenthan says that the twins set up wooden barricades. At that moment, the hero remembers the existence of the twins in question. One of them says she told them to make the place more resistant, while her sister argues that if they had followed the plan, they wouldn't have finished before the wave started. Park calls them Hana Hyung and Han Dong, questioning what they are doing. Surprised, the hero recalls that indeed there were 2 of them. He remembers that since the 3rd wave, he had been impressed by how well they moved to fend off the monsters. He understands that because they are twins, they stood out even more. Upon seeing the protagonist, both blush, saying that he is the Blood Wolf. Seeing this, the hero is in shock as he still hasn't gotten used to this horrible nickname. Then he gets irritated because Valenthan gave him that name all on his own without consulting him. Arms crossed, he says they did a good job and asks if they bought the equipment with their points, to which one of them replies yes. The other says they need more wood and won't have time if only the 2 of them prepare everything. The hero thinks that wooden barricades won't do much against the 10th wave. At that moment, the black bird watches one of them while the giant bird constellation spreads its wings toward the other player. Seong recalls that 2 demon lords are watching over them and realizes that both have skills in construction and fortification. At that moment, the protagonist declares that he will take care of the wood, making both of their eyes shine. Celebrating, they say that the Blood Wolf is the best. Sometime later, the quartet begins entering the forest. The hero then unsheathes his new sword. One of the twins asks if he is going to cut wood with a sword, while the other questions if he doesn't want an axe. However, the boy responds that he is fine. Then with just one sword strike, he manages to cut the wood in half. Observing carefully, he states that as things are now, this is his limit without using internal magic. He notices that the sword was able to damage the rock, but if the master's power is insufficient, it cannot even cut a tree properly. Closing his eyes, he states that he still has a long way to go. Upon opening the Vault of Greed, he grabs the sword, but the 18 strikes are swelling. Then, with just one blow, he manages to cut the wood perfectly, making it fall to the ground. Everyone is impressed by the hero's strength. The system notifies that through internal energy, according to the sword's ability, the 18 strikes have been enhanced. With that, the boy moves towards several trees, deforesting the entire forest. Looking around, the boy says that he does not need to worry about transportation because someone will take care of it. Sometime later, he becomes exhausted from carrying all the logs by himself. The boy thinks he was joking, but he realizes that the blonde guy has already moved 3. Soon, he remembers that he was going to lead all for him to do anyway. The serious student states that he has now finished everything with the twins and should focus on something else. Then he heads toward the wounded, who are under some kind of tent. The blue-haired girl says she will heal this person and then take care of the next one. At that moment, the boy remembers that he has talked to her before whenever they were on the front lines treating patients. She heals everyone without anyone to help her. The bloodstained lion ends up licking all the red juice around that specific player. She was chosen by the great commander of Hell, Marvis rank 5. This Marvis in question has the power both to cause and heal diseases. At that moment, the protagonist appears, asking them to divide responsibilities. He comments that he will take care of patients with severe external injuries and that she will handle those with internal injuries. At that moment, the healer simply stands up, saying that she understands. Then the boy immediately opens the guild vault, using the healing ability. Impressed, the girl says that the boy's abilities have improved. Meanwhile, Cheyenne thinks that they healed the second circle spell, which is much stronger than the first circle one. Then he tells the girl that she will be better than him. He explains that the constellation she made a contract with is very powerful. Upon seeing this, the lion constellation touches its mane, feeling satisfied after being praised by a human. Sometime later, the protagonist tells her that she can call them again if she needs help. As he walks through the area, the hero notices that the camp's structure has become more solid than he expected. He is surprised by how much things have changed while he was at the Rocky Mountain. A short time later, he calls for the old man. He understands that the equipment Yu and Kang we're using must have been made by Shang and Siak. Quickly, the old man notices the hero's sword, questioning its story. Impressed, he says he wondered where he had gone and that, apparently, he has returned with a masterpiece. Changing his posture, he says that this sword probably won't even need sharpening. However, the protagonist shows him a stone, saying that he should take a look at it. At that moment, the old man says it looks like a very unique mineral. It is the hazel stone which the boy obtained after defeating the monkey boss on the Rocky Mountain. He explains that he was thinking of making armor with it, and the blacksmith comments that he has already made weapons for everyone in the camp. Then Seong asks if he can train before the first wave. Looking at the remaining time, the old man comments that he has a little leeway and asks if there is any reason for the rush. As he leaves, Shang simply says yes. Then he thinks that he is planning to go all out in the next wave. A short time later, he and Kang are training, and then he comments that the muscular guy has improved a lot during this time. He says that he has even learned the Tai Chi movements properly, even without ever having studied them. And the redhead responds that he has a talent for learning with his body. However, the hero says that this is not exactly maximizing his strength. Suddenly, he charges at the unprepared muscular guy. The hero uses the Jinju family fist technique, a martial art specialized in close combat. At that moment, both fists collide. The muscular guy's body is trembling while the hero remains firm. Seo feels the impact, impressed by what she has just witnessed. As he looks at his hand, the redhead sees it trembling, realizing that the boy's fist is truly strong. After that, the hero says that when the man's form is complete, he will also teach him the mental techniques. The Dome of Affairs calls for Jong Pil, who quickly arrives like a lackey. He asks if the boy is free, and he replies that he is. Without any ceremony, the protagonist orders him to spar with Han Chul. However, the man's murderous expression ends up scaring him. The blonde guy says he has something important to do, while the hero tells the redhead to use him however he wants. Then he decides to grab him by the collar and drag him mercilessly. At that moment, the donkey-headed thief constellation ends up rolling on the ground, laughing uncontrollably at the situation. Sometime later, the hero is training together with Yu. He notices that her style is very different from Kang's and that she knows how to make the most of her strengths. However, he tells her that her technique is good, but it lacks power. He explains that it is fine when facing many weak monsters, but when fighting a strong monster alone, just speed and technique will not be enough. Upon hearing this, the crowned spider constellation nods in agreement. The girl then agrees with what the protagonist said. Seong says that every time he leaves the camp, he faces boss monsters, and they are much stronger than the normal ones that appear in the waves. He comments that he predicts a boss might appear in the next wave. However, this is not just a prediction, but he cannot tell the rest, leaving you to figure it out on her own. Smiling, the hero says that from now on, he is counting on her to lead the camp. She smiles back, agreeing. Only 5 minutes remain before the 10th and final wave begins. Seong is wearing the Red Wolf armor, increasing his attack by 10% and instilling fear in monsters. The hero tells the old man that he has exceeded his expectations. Then the crowned soldier constellation states that the technique used in the armor ensures its quality. At that moment, the boy asks the old man to take shelter. But even so, he wants to see his masterpiece shine. Giving a thumbs up, he says he knows the boy won't let a single fly pass through the area. The hero just asks him to stay safe behind everyone. At that moment, the system notifies that the 10th and final wave is about to begin. A gigantic pack of crimson red wolves arrives, along with the insane monkeys as well. They realize that they have already faced these bosses before and start feeling confident. Upon seeing the boar, one of them questions if there aren't too many monsters. At that moment, the leader explains that since they have already defeated these monsters once, they should stay calm and form a defensive line around the barricades. Suddenly, that wolf boss appears. Its name is Hanyu, the Red Fang. The girls are completely terrified. Besides him, Pagmolar, the Red, and Claw Reaper Red also appear. At that moment, the group finds themselves surrounded by several powerful monsters. Worried, they ask the leader what to do now. Stammering, the girl starts thinking. With no time for that, the hero charges forward at full speed, so quickly that he strikes one of the monsters with his dagger. The Red Wolves end up being terrified due to the effect of the Red Wolf armor. With a completely different aura, the protagonist calls for Yu and Kang, telling them to snap out of it. This is the power of Speed Chain, which has been enhanced due to the materialization of the Black Tower. The hero launches this technique against the Grey Wolf, which ends up feeling its effect. He realizes that the wolf is much weaker, but then he quickly understands that, in reality, he has become much stronger. In front of him stands Hanyu, the Red Fang, who has entered Berserker mode. As he watches his opponent approach, the boy thinks that this attack just took out half the field in a single strike. But now, at this moment, he knows the patterns of his opponent's ability. With that, he charges in for a frontal attack using his sword. Then quickly, he dodges the wolf's attack. Jumping over it, he manages to strike it directly on the head. After defeating it, the system notifies that he has received 4,000 personal merit points, as well as the item Hanyu's Fang. With that, he uses his authority of gluttony to absorb it, increasing his strength by 5 and his agility by 10. Seeing their leader die, the Red Wolves become even more frightened. Then the protagonist asks a random person to take care of them, and he moves on to fight other bosses. Meanwhile, Kang is facing that giant boar head-on. Seeing this, the hero realizes that he is fighting purely with brute strength, as that is his style. At that moment, Pagmola the Red uses his earthquake ability. Then quickly, the muscular Russian punches the ground, producing the same effect. In this case, he neutralized the earthquake by using another one. At that moment, the hero tells him to use Jinju Yonga's fist first form. Grabbing his sword, he asks Kang to follow his lead. Quickly, the hero uses his agility and manages to get behind the monster. At that moment, he uses the first technique of the Jinju fist, landing a powerful punch to break its horn. With that, Kang's Hanxi fist was improved, and he charges forward to attack the boar head-on. With a series of punches, he manages to defeat it without much difficulty. Afterward, he is impressed with his own abilities. He wonders if blessing means being supported by a constellation. Seong explains that it does, and that he will eventually be able to use this power without the influence of constellations. Using the utility of gluttony, the boy absorbs the nutrients, increasing his strength by 5 and his stamina by 10. Then he asks Kang if he can take care of the rest of the boar, to which Kang agrees. Heading toward the rocky mountain, the protagonist affirms to himself that the trial is not over yet. At the same time, the girl is telling everyone not to be afraid. She asks the wounded to retreat behind the barricades. Moving toward the mountain, the hero thinks that Yuxiu is better than he had imagined. However, when looking back, the protagonist notices Park running away from the monkeys while holding a banana. Shocked, the boy questions who this guy is and why he is always so strangely useful. The girl notices that besides fleeing, he is also stealing equipment from the red monkeys. She understands that, apparently, he has learned the theft skill from the 6th Demon Lord. Back at the camp, the monkeys are enraged, while the leader orders a retreat and says she will handle the named monster. At that moment, the protagonist appears, and shocked, you ask why he is here. The hero responds that the other areas have already been stabilized and that they should take care of this guy. Quickly, both grab their weapons and charge toward the monkey boss. The hero realizes that for someone with 2 swords, a monster with a shield is quite a challenge. In this situation, he understands that the opponent is very clever, making good use of the shield. Observing the girl, he notices that she wields her sword well, but her legs do not keep up. Getting closer, he asks you to follow his steps from now on. He explains that the easiest way to learn is through real combat. At that moment, he uses Kamile's dual swordsmanship. Fully unleashing his aura and expression, the protagonist states that no one can keep up with him when he uses this ability. From a distance, the girl is impressed by his skill. With a quick movement, the hero grabs his dagger and spins toward the monkey. In milliseconds, he lands several precise strikes. Gathering courage, she runs toward the monster. Both strike it with multiple blade attacks, giving it no chance to defend. Smiling, the protagonist says that she is keeping up well and that they should move even faster. With that, they end up creating a kind of tornado from their incredible speed. This way, they manage to strike the opponent from multiple directions. With eyes filled with determination, both stare at their enemy and finish it off with a synchronized strike. At that moment, the system notifies that Claw Reaper Red has been defeated. He increased his personal merit by 4,000 and received the sword of the defeated monster. Seeing that their leader has fallen, all the monkeys are in shock and begin to retreat. Then a notification announces that they have successfully completed the 10th wave and also the first chapter of the tutorial. The twins start celebrating on their own, saying it was a job well done. However, the hero does not seem very happy and thinks that it is too early to celebrate. Everyone appears exhausted from the battle while checking their menus. Arms crossed, Seong announces that they must travel across the plains to reach their destination, with only 167 hours remaining. After he announces that they are leaving this place, everyone is shocked and asks why, since they were just getting used to it. The hero recalls that the first chapter was meant for adaptation and, as expected, people adapted and survived with great determination. He understands that it is natural for it to be difficult to leave a place they have just adjusted to. The red-haired girl then asks where they are going and if, by any chance, it is a village. However, she questions the presence of monsters, while another person comments that they are capable of handling anything like that. Upon hearing this, everyone agrees, saying that if they pass this test, the rest will be nothing. Impressed, the hero understands that thanks to the twins, the atmosphere has improved a bit. He quickly realizes that they were the ones who helped the whole time. The post-war cleanup of this wave was handled quickly. People worked together harmoniously. The kitchen gathered meat from the monsters, and the remaining task fell to Shang and Siak. It ended up being a lot of work since there were many monsters, but by working together, they resolved it quickly. With that, the hero remembers that before his regression, things were very different. The atmosphere was worse, and the camp was poorly managed. Looking closely, the protagonist notices that the twins are scared despite acting brave. At that moment, he approaches, and one of them calls him the Blood Wolf. This completely demoralizes him since the title is not just a nickname, but something extremely important. The girls then ask what he wants. Awkwardly, he simply thanks them for what they said earlier. Quickly, their expressions change to a look of mischief. They explain that it was nothing and that they won't make a fuss about it. Annoyed, the boy asks if they want anything else. Then both of them say yes, if it's not too much trouble. Later that day, they show him a place filled with several sacks. Seong asks if they are for bodies, and one of them is shocked, saying they are meant for sleeping. He realizes he hadn't noticed this before since he had kept his distance. They explain that they need to carry this equipment, emergency rations, and much more, and that if they made a cart, they wouldn't be able to pull it. They comment that if each person had to carry one, it would only slow everything down. Then the protagonist asks why they don't just build one, while another asks how they would pull it. Quickly, the hero thinks of a solution. He sees two options, the first being to tame a monster, but the problem is that there are none alive. So only the second option remains, and at that moment, he opens the Vault of Greed. Using the necromancy spell from the Black Tower, he infuses mana into the dead and summons them. With an imposing gaze, he orders them to do the work. Everyone in the village is shocked by this bizarre ability. However, the hero assures them that it is safe and that they should not worry. Curious, the leader asks if she can touch them. As she approaches, she begins petting one, saying that it feels like a little pet. The twins then also become interested and start petting the skeleton. From afar, the protagonist thinks that the skeletons are simply following their master's orders. However, in any case, the atmosphere improves, which is a good thing. Sometime later, the boy is lying in the sleeping bag, thinking that it is surprisingly well made. At that moment, the prince rubs his belly, sighs, and says that it was a good meal. Completely changing the subject, the boy starts thinking about the next tutorial chapter. Quickly, he recalls the past, which seems to have been filled with losses. Then he abruptly turns over, deciding to focus only on the present, because if he loses this chance, he will not be able to go back again. At that moment, the bent crow lowers its beak and points at the boy. Then it points at the sword. The bent crow says that the boy should offer the sword to him. It explains that if he refuses, he will no longer be allowed to access the Vault of Greed. Smiling, the protagonist tells him to go ahead. He thinks that by using Mammon's power, he has realized something. He had thought he was allowed to use the vault out of curiosity, but he was wrong. With a suspicious look, he questions the creature about whether the power he uses is different from the real vault. He understands that it is not as if the crow can stop him from accessing it, since the power he has comes from Mammon's vault after the regression. Then, when he regressed, the physical vault disappeared, leaving only its internal form, which became part of his authority. Seeing this, the bent crow spreads its wings in fury, responding to the boy's arrogance. Despite this, Seong understands that provoking this constellation is dangerous and explains that he is not saying he will not handle the situation. He says that Durandal is the strongest weapon he has right now and that he will work with the demon lord to create a replica, because Mammon can replicate items and most of the treasures in his vault are just replicas. With that, the bent crow agrees and says that having another replica in his collection wouldn't be so bad. Negotiating with the creature, the boy asks for access to the real vault in exchange. Upon hearing this, the crow makes a rather unusual expression. Seong thinks that with his current abilities, he can only borrow the power of treasures, not use a real treasure. Then the bent crow looks around uncomfortably, as if at a disadvantage. This is reflected in the hero's thoughts, as he remembers having entered Mammon's vault in his past life, having some understanding of its layout. He recalls that the crow keeps all the valuable and rare items in the depths, while the lower level ones are near the vault's entrance. He also understands that receiving the legendary sword Durandal is not a bad trade, and with that, the bent crow ends up accepting. The constellation's red juice spills, sealing the contract. At that moment, the sword becomes imbued with the red juice and then disappears. Looking at the entrance of the vault, the hero states that he will finally be able to get the things he wants. Already inside the Vault of Greed, he realizes that it is difficult to find equipment, and that most of the items near the entrance are consumables. Curious, he picks up the Forest Elf's orb, which is a potion. Without thinking twice, he quickly drinks it, surprising the crow. Excited, he says that it will be very useful. Irritated, the crow explains that he opened the vault because of the contract, but if the treasures are used recklessly, the player will not be forgiven. Seong analyzes the situation and understands that the creature accepted the proposal because of Durandal, but is still anxious. So, to reassure it, he states that he will only use the items when necessary. The next day, everyone is preparing for the move. At that moment, Seong appears, offering to help. As he approaches the skeleton, he wonders what is going on, because he does not remember this person who looks like a mad scientist. Then he questions if this person ended up dying before the regression in the past. The hero approaches and the weird nerd apologizes, saying that he was distracted. Coming closer, the nerd asks if there is a problem, and then explains that he is just vaccinating. Not understanding anything, the boy questions him. The mad scientist says that it is incredible that someone can stand without muscles and tendons and wonders if the black mist between the bones makes that connection. Surprised, the boy realizes that the man seems to be able to see mana, making him quite intelligent. He thinks that the man has talent for dark magic, so the boy apologizes, saying that it is just a habit of the profession. Curious, the protagonist asks if he used to be a doctor by any chance. Introducing himself, he says that he was just doing his master's in anatomy, and that his name is Baekhyun. Nervous, he says that, unfortunately, it is not very useful, as it cannot be used to attack or heal. Thoughtful, the hero considers the possibility of this man learning to apply his knowledge to mana manipulation. Being very welcoming, he asks Buck to sit for a moment. Picking up a weapon, he says it will be quick. Then he quickly draws some sort of circle around the man. This opens the Vault of Greed, and he takes out the black magic stone. Then he throws it directly into the circle where Beck is sitting. Not understanding anything, the man wonders if this mist is the same that was inside the skeleton. The hero simply places his hand on Beck's shoulders and warns him that it will hurt a bit, but he advises him to grit his teeth. He remembers that in the Black Tower, there is not just the creation of a magic circle. Additionally, there is only one method to forcibly create someone's magic circle. Seong tells him to shut his mouth now, or he will turn into barbecue. At that moment, he begins using his magic to force the creation of the magic circle within the man. Being very observant, the hero understands that the man's quick reaction shows that he has talent, and he thinks that he must be feeling his heart being compressed, and that if he were weak, he would have already lost consciousness by now. With a proud tone, the hero says that the man endured well, but Beck seems to be in complete shock. Seong understands that it was fast and that Beck is absorbing the high-level mana gem's energy very quickly. He seems completely exhausted. Smiling, the hero congratulates him on his hard work. Then he ends up summoning another weird skeleton. The scientist then tries using magic to control it, and surprisingly, he starts dismantling it. The hero understands that he is reconstructing the skeleton from an anatomical perspective. He thinks that it is slower than his method, but it is much more effective and solid. At that moment, Beck uses the turn Rise to bring the creature back to life. Quickly, the skeleton responds to his call and stands up. Then the constellation, the horse that crushes deaths, stares at player Bach with great interest. This is Kamigan, the fourth demon lord, the great Marquis of Hell. He understands that this is the birth of a necromancer. Arms crossed, the hero realizes that if Kamigan is showing interest, he no longer needs to interfere, and he is pleased that someone can work with skeletons, even if they leave the battlefield. Approaching the hero, the mad scientist thanks him. Awkwardly, he says that, in truth, he was afraid of not being very useful to the camp. Then the protagonist simply tells him to be more confident because he caught Kamigan's attention, proving that he has potential. Then Beck says that he found a talent in this place that he never discovered on Earth and that he will do his best to improve his power. Interested, Seong gets straight to the point, informing him that he will give him a mission. With that, he opens the Vault of Greed once more. Grabbing the body of the manticore, a monster with the head and body of a tiger, a mane, boar-like tusks, buffalo horns, and bat wings. Shocked, the man wonders what this means. Then the hero explains that he must try to make it rise before the end of the tutorial. The Anticeria is a rare monster found only on the 40th floor of the tower, and if he can create an Anticeria, he will be the strongest in the camp. Sometime later, they are notified that they have only 151 hours to move across the plains. Arguing, one of the twins says that her cart is faster than her sister's. Meanwhile, the hero thinks that both carts are great and that the twins are doing very well too. Additionally, he notices that Beck is losing to Kamigan and necromancy. Then he affirms to himself that he hopes things continue going well because there will be a monster ambush in this plane. However, he soon realizes that he does not remember exactly where it will happen. Suddenly, he calls for Jong Pil, who quickly responds. At that moment, he orders him to scout the surroundings. However, Park argues that everyone is already looking ahead. Then Seong points out that he should go a few kilometers ahead. Irritated, the blonde guy says that his legs may be fast, but he is not a sprinter. So the protagonist loses the argument, understanding that the blonde guy has a point. Changing his plan, he decides to grab a bone from the sack. Then he quickly assembles a skeleton using his necromancy. Surprised, Park asks if this is a gift for him. Seong simply responds that it depends on how he performs. Blushing, the blonde says he will name it Bak Hang in honor of the protagonist. Without hesitation, he hops onto the skeletal horse and sets off to complete the hero's mission. Confused, the boy wonders how someone like him awakened the talent to be a hunter. Sometime later, Park is still riding the skeletal horse. He thinks it is fast and that riding this thing reminds him of his days before coming here when used to show off by driving around the city. He states that following Jong was a wonderful choice. Then the monkey-headed thief constellation does its best to hold back laughter, knowing what is about to happen. Park then asks if he is being provoked again. At that moment, something appears in front of him and leaves him in shock. It is a horde of goblins thirsty for battle. Completely terrified, the boy does not think twice and decides to flee. Then the monkey-headed thief rolls on the ground, unable to contain its laughter at the situation. Tearing up in fear, the blonde thinks that if he can reach Jong, he knows Jong will take care of it. Suddenly, he starts to see the group he was with. Shocked, he asks what Jong is saying. Jong then orders him to duck. Being quite smart, the blonde manages to read lips and understand what is being said. But when he sees the fireball forming in the hero's hand, he wonders if Jong really thinks that ducking will help. Then, without thinking twice, the protagonist launches a little fire ice cream toward the goblins, defeating them. Proudly, he says that there is nothing better for handling multiple enemies than this. The leader then appears, ordering everyone to hide behind the carts, because at that moment, they are under attack. The blonde girls hide behind the carts while Jong calls for Yuxiu and Kang to follow him. Both comply without hesitation and head toward the hero. At that moment, Jong decides to use his broad shield to protect them. He also amplifies the power of the lightning chain. Kang uses open war, and Yuxiu uses the first leg of the tarantula. All of them charge toward the goblins, landing multiple different attacks. The group members are surprised by the level of skill on display. Excited, both fighters say they should not be impressed, but should help instead. At that moment, the entire carriage group charges toward the goblins in a frantic battle. The green monsters themselves begin to feel fear. Then the exoskeleton controlled by the mad scientist also appears. Afraid of dying, the little green creatures decide to retreat. Then the system congratulates them for successfully blocking the goblin ambush. Sometime later, the leader praises them, saying they will chase down those who fled, but for now, they need to regroup. Then Jong thinks that if they fled, it means there must be a base nearby. He calls for Yu, telling her that once they are regrouped, she should not worry about him and continue moving forward. He then explains that Yu will go after the goblins, and when he looks to the side, he sees Park on his knees, completely exhausted. Then he approaches and decides to give him some kind of potion. Smiling, he congratulates him on a job well done, and the blonde's expression changes completely. Filled with emotion, he says that Seong is the only one he can trust. Sometime later, the hero appears near the group of goblins hidden. Investigating them, he notices that the goblin base is deeper in the forest, and judging by the size of the group that attacked them, there must be at least 1,000 goblins in the area. He wonders how he should attack and considers the possibility of burning down the entire forest. Meanwhile, one of the goblins seems to be dozing off on duty. However, when he looks to the side, he sees his fellow goblin already lifeless. Sion appears behind him with a terrifying aura, saying that he will be joining his little friend. Then he strikes him from behind. This was his stealth technique from Hukurga. Looking back, he hears a strange noise. Moving stealthily, he quickly runs to hide behind a tree. A group of goblins appears, holding various sharp weapons. The system then notifies that the protagonist has discovered a hidden dungeon called the Path of the Cunning Goblins. Looking around, Sion understands that for goblins, they built this place quite well, and that the most luxurious room must belong to the boss. Analyzing the group, he realizes they must be in a panic now since all the perimeter goblins are gone. However, when he looks to the side, he notices a group trapped in a cage. They are humans. Sion understands that these people might have started the tutorial in this place. He admits that he feels bad for them, but saving them would be absurd. At the same time, a goblin is patrolling the perimeter. The hero slowly approaches the area, and without hesitation, he heads straight for the short Verity, attacking him fatally. With that, the authorities grant him gluttony to devour the goblin, but the hungry prince complains that the taste and quantity are disappointing. After defeating the short Verity, the hero enters the area he was guarding. Then he comes across several hidden weapons and armor. Looking around, he notices that there are some pretty decent weapons. With that, he takes out the dimensional bag from the Vault of Greed to collect all the weapons. He understands that obtaining items of this level in the tutorial is no easy feat. It is almost like a watered-down version of Mammon's vault. At that moment, the bent crow frowns, offended by the comparison between this horrible vault and his own. Walking through the area, he notices an open chest. Inside, there are several mana stones. Analyzing them closely, he says that this is perfect. Quickly, he thinks of a great way to deal with all these goblins. Meanwhile, one of the goblins is scolding the others. This is the goblin boss, asking if they still haven't found the intruder. He calls his subordinates useless and strikes them. He orders them to find this guy quickly because he is hungry. He tells them to bring him the youngest human they can find. Sighing in frustration, the leader says that they are idiots and that their level is unacceptable. Behind him, the hero agrees and calls him beautiful, while the goblin stiffens. However, he quickly realizes that this is not one of his subordinates. Without hesitation, the hero lands a precise strike with one of his blades, leaving the monster in shock. Desperate, the goblin asks who the hero is, and the boy responds that if he tells him, he won't live long enough to remember. Not understanding anything, the goblin asks how the human got here. The man then asks if he is a named monster and comments that his reflexes are quite fast. In shock, the boss realizes that this human is dangerous because he didn't hesitate to attack. Panicking, he starts calling all the guards to come immediately. But with certainty, the hero says that it's useless because it's already too late. Suddenly, a massive explosion erupts in the forest. Looking out the window, the goblin boss sees that it is his village. Mana stones are literally minerals infused with pure mana. They have various uses, but one of the most powerful ways to use them is to enchant them with explosion magic. Turning them into bombs, they detonate all the mana inside them, and even the weakest mana stones can destroy an entire house. Being quite explanatory, the hero explains that he placed them all over the village. Consumed by fury, the goblin boss charges at him, questioning how he dared to do this. However, the hero dodges effortlessly. Then, quickly, he counterattacks, and at that moment, the system notifies that he has defeated the goblin boss, increasing his contribution by 8,000. Additionally, he acquires the Spiked Club of Hokujanaki. He realizes that, according to the rules, he has to defeat thousands of goblins, so the name monster must have been adjusted to be weaker. Additionally, the system notifies that he has conquered the hidden dungeon Village of the Cunning Goblins, increasing his personal contribution by 20,000. And as if that wasn't enough, the rash one looks at the boy with bright, sparkling eyes. Quickly, he he decides to use the authority of gluttony to absorb the nutrients, increasing agility by 5 and intellect by 10. Moreover, he manages to absorb mana, which even ends up being lost to the hero himself. The prince looks at the giant well-cooked dish, desiring it even more. At that moment, the hero realizes that he must be talking about the village, saying that there are more than 1,000, and that if he uses the authority to eat each one, it will take a long time. However, the demon ends up enhancing the authority of gluttony to a level that surprises him. Smiling, he says that this was the imperfect timing. And upon using the already enhanced authority of gluttony, he states that he can devour as much as he wants. The fangs of gluttony descend upon the entire village, devouring everything in sight. In shock, the protagonist says that he had forgotten why he treated him like a spoiled child throwing a tantrum. Because in fact, this demon is truly a demon. Shortly after, he is notified that he has devoured 2,101 goblins within the area. A large amount of internal energy and mana is being absorbed by his body. He is also informed that he has successfully created the third mana cycle through the training methods of the Black Tower, and that with the creation of the new cycle, he can now use level 3 magic. Smiling, the protagonist says that he finally achieved the third cycle in the second chapter of the tutorial. Furthermore, he set a new record for the tower, an impressive feat. As a reward, he received an increase of 100,000 points. Several magic constellations take an interest in him, and the fifth day observes him with a beautiful smile. Recalling, the hero remembers that the fifth day is the goddess of love and beauty, Freya. However, he thinks that normally constellations of this level only appear at the end of the tutorial. But he soon remembers that he already has 2 demons by his side and hopes he is not offending the goddess Freya with this. The bowed raven warns that it will not tolerate anyone showing interest in its domain, while the fifth day maintains an enigmatic smile. Then the bowed raven's legs tremble, while the hero thinks that Freya does not seem too concerned about it. But to prevent the next demon war, he needs to ally with the divine beings. Sometime later, the group notices the hero's presence arriving at the location. In shock, they question how he managed to do this and thank him. They also say that they will never forget his kindness. Embarrassed, the protagonist simply nods while wondering if he will take them with him. He understands that, even though he unintentionally rescued them all, he does not feel any responsibility for it. Opening his mouth, one of the men says that he knows what the boy is thinking. He explains that they do not plan to hold him back, saying that they will follow their own destiny on their own. At that moment, Seong realizes that this guy must be the leader, and he understands that he seems trustworthy after seeing the confidence in his people's eyes. With arms crossed, he says that he does not plan to protect them. He comments that if they want to come along, they will need to be more determined than ever. This statement makes the leader completely happy. Showing gratitude, the man says that he truly thanks the summoning benefactor, while Seong says that they need to keep moving until noon. Meanwhile, the leader asks who is okay and comments that if anyone has difficulty, they can rest. The constellation Old Man mutated into a crocodile teaches the contractor to walk with more strength. Changing the subject, the girl asks if he thinks the protagonist will be okay, and the same replies that he is not weak and should return even stronger. However, Yuxiu says she cannot imagine him being even stronger. Suddenly, Park appears running with his skeleton. The girl wonders why Seong seems to be in such a hurry. On his knees on the ground, he begins to vomit a rainbow. The blue-haired healer then appears, saying she will take a look. She approaches the boy and begins to use healing magic. Startled, she quickly realizes that it is poison. The leader asks if it was the goblins, but the girl explains that she saw no external wounds, meaning it was probably something inhaled. So quickly, she becomes alarmed because she notices a strange smell. Desperate, she orders everyone to grab a cloth and cover their noses and mouths as the poison is in the air. But by the looks of it, it is already too late, as all the carriages start to feel unwell. Then the blood-stained lion announces that it is time to make a choice, as the number of patients is too high. The girl thinks that she had already trained a suitable healer and forgets that she needs to choose now. He understands that if that person were here in times like this, things would be different. At that moment, the protagonist opens the greed vault using the breeze ability. It's a very refreshing breeze that ends up dispersing all the local poison. The hero says he didn't expect it to spread so quickly. Everyone is surprised to see the presence of the leader. Completely exhausted and almost dying, Park simply thanks his big brother. After that, he uses the cure poison ability on him, while thinking that poison treatment is Marbus's specialty, but it will be faster if he can help as well. They are very happy that Seong has returned. Then he explains that thanks to Hanjo's rules, he arrived here earlier than expected. After the meeting, the girl asks Shine about who these people are. The man then introduces himself as Iljung, saying that thanks to the boy, they managed to survive. He comments that if it's not a problem, he would like to join the boy and his clan, and that they will do their best. Interrupting the man's words, the leader simply extends her hand. With a gentle smile, she announces that he is welcome. Surprised, the man questions whether they are truly being accepted, and she replies that if Seong recognizes them all, then everything is fine, and they are all welcome. After that, she mentions that they still have some leather clothes they kept in reserve. The girl then says she is surprised that he brought people, and he replies that they survived up to this point, showing that their will is very strong. Then the girl says that willpower is the most important thought in this place. The system notifies that he has successfully passed the trial of unstable legs and also the trial of acid cloth, and that they also successfully hunted the pack of red bears, meaning that everyone who participated in the trial will receive 2,000 points. Aizen thinks that before returning, he had to risk his life to complete each trial, but now it's different because no one died, and thanks to that, he was able to face the secret angel whenever he had the chance. He understands that back then, even if he discovered dungeons, he wouldn't have been able to conquer them. Sometime later, the hero uses his authority of gluttony, designating whole insects for the prince. Then the prince, hungry, ends up savoring the tastes, saying that the crunchy texture is always fantastic. Being from a dungeon species, the hero thinks that this way he will reach Circle 4 faster than he planned. Suddenly, a voice calls him Big Brother. It's Park, and Cyan then questions how he found him. Responding, he says that he was exploring and found his trail, so he decided to follow. He asks if he is going somewhere, and the latter says it's time to return as he found everything he was looking for. Completely excited, the blonde says that the boy is incredible and that he is always amazed when he sees his achievements. Thoughtful, the hero understands that even being ranked number 1 wouldn't be strange, as there are exceptional players in the tower. Some of them receive power from a powerful constellation from the beginning, or become powerful through their own achievements. The hero then says they should go, while Park suggests at least trying a ride on his white wolf. He explains that it has become easier to control and that soon the speed should be incredible. In this tutorial, he is informed that he must follow the arrow, with 116 hours remaining. Already at night, the system also notifies that they have successfully passed the trial of the giant forest. Yu congratulates them, telling them they should rest to reorganize. With arms crossed, the hero notices that everyone's expressions have improved, which must be thanks to the improvement in his confidence skills. Suddenly, Kane arrives for training. He says he would like to request a training session, while Yu says the same. Smiling, the protagonist explains that he will postpone it for today. Not understanding anything, the muscular one asks why. At that moment, the boy simply explains that they are probably close to their destination. Sometime later, all the people in the group arrive at the location of Chapter 2. The hero notices that there is no system message mentioning the ranking, and it seems they did not arrive in first place. He considers the possibility that some group went straight to the destination without collecting anything. Then it is announced that Chapter 3 collision will begin in 113 hours, which makes everyone apprehensive. Looking around, Yu ends up becoming extremely scared. A kind of giant bird arrives at the location along with some humanoid mages, in addition to completely muscular wolves. Not understanding anything and desperate, Park points, wondering what all this is. He warns that they are all surrounded by various monsters. Xiong then begins to prepare for battle. At that moment, he uses the Freezing Wave ability, an offensive ice-type magic from the Blue Tower. The power of Freezing Wave ends up being enhanced according to the principles of the Black Tower. Clenching his fists, this attack begins to descend toward the monsters. Upon being hit, they end up being frozen. Then the principle of magic expresses anticipation for a refreshing meal, saying it will be a new recipe. Looking back, Xiong announces that during the remaining time, they must go all out. Shortly after defeating several monsters, the hero approaches the leader. Nervous, she thinks that, as expected, Xiong is very strong. Park appears running with his skeleton horse, saying that he gathered all the monsters. With that, he manages to freeze them without any difficulty. He thinks that if they continue like this, they will be able to advance a lot. Chapter 3 of the Collision tutorial contains survival content. Players who reach the destination will be able to pass through the 3rd chapter. He concludes that this will end up becoming a fierce battlefield. That is the reason they are trying to secure the position near the center while the frequency increases. It is notified that he has leveled up, so the prince ends up drooling after seeing a new delicacy. This delicacy in question apparently is the bird flying above. One of the men starts laughing, questioning if these are the new ones. Then the constellation the goat that plays with chaos approves and at the same time shows anger. The crazy blonde says that this one is worth the god's attention. While playing a flute, he comments that he doesn't know why the goat that plays with chaos hates them so much. With this flute, he begins to play some kind of melody while saying that this is what God wants. With a psychotic smile, he states that he will fulfill his will, and apparently this flute can locate all the monsters. 2 days pass fighting these monsters, and at this moment, the group reaches the halfway point. Analyzing the situation, the hero understands that it is not just Yuxu, but that the skills of the others have also increased significantly. Quickly, he opens the greed vault to use the kobold twin ears. Meanwhile, several monsters head towards Park, who is already filled with fear. Riding his skeleton horse, he starts calling for his big brother. Surprised, the hero wonders what is happening as there are many monsters and none of them are ordinary. Using his hearing ability acquired from the vault, he realizes that this melody is from Syrinx. Frightened, he wonders why he is hearing this sound right there. Once again, the other young man appears desperate, screaming for his brother's help. But he is saved by the freezing power, which makes the monsters stop running. save, he realizes that he almost died. Following Syrinx's melody, he wonders where all those monsters came from. Seong continues listening to the music and reflects that no one would think he would be involved with that guy again. They show Pan, the goat that plays the melody of chaos. The protagonist explains that before his regression, he was the first celestial being to take an interest in him. To meet the goat's expectations, he did everything that was asked, but gained nothing in return. According to Seong, he was just entertainment for Pan, and as soon as he lost interest, he abandoned him. Then he questions why he has not had contact with Pan in this new life, and he wonders what that situation might mean. The system notifies that the constellation Bowed Raven has cut off communication with all low-rank constellations. With this, the protagonist reaches a conclusion. Seong believes that the boy's pride was hurt when he was blocked by Mammon, and that perhaps he has decided to take revenge. But determined to change, the young man says he needs to find the source and end that situation quickly. He wonders if the people will endure even if he leaves. It is notified that the player Kang Hanchil is using a power called Opening Battle Shock. After using the power, he says that he will hold the line in that place. Seong observes him and feels a bit doubtful. Seo appears and warns that the young man is not the only one there. They inform that the girl is using the second leg of the tarantula. She looks at the protagonist and asks if he is thinking about something, warning that he should leave quickly. On top of the skeleton monster, the blonde young man appears again and suggests that Hyungnam ride with him. Not understanding, the protagonist looks a bit confused. Laughing, the young man says that he has always lived on 2 legs, but asks to be warned next time before they use magic. Pan continues playing his melody and attracting some monsters to the area. Seong observes and realizes that they are minotaurs and that there are 5 of them, all as strong as named monsters. Noticing the young man's presence, Syrinx mocks him, saying that he arrived too early. He states that he thought the boy would be having fun with the children for a little longer. The protagonist analyzes the situation and notices that the man overused the power of a constellation and transformed his body. Thinking, he reflects that the man must be wagering a great amount of vital energy to freely control those monsters. It is reported that the goat constellation gave a sinister smile and stared at someone. Syrinx keeps laughing and says that he understands what the gods want, affirming that he will do what was desired, giving orders for them to attack. All the minotaurs begin moving together towards Suwon, but the boy declares that he will deal with all of them from a certain distance. He unleashes the freezing power and manages to dominate his opponents, but Pan says that this is not the end. The man makes a call to the giant worm, which emerges from the ground. According to the system, the Greed Vault has been opened. Suwon activates the power of Earth Wave. This seismic magic from the Yellow Tower causes a wave of earth that engulfs the enemies. With this, the protagonist gradually dominates the giant worm. However, he receives information that the goat constellation is growing angry and desires for him to fall into fear. Pan resumes playing his melody and the minotaurs start returning to their form after being frozen. The protagonist realizes that this is the insane mode, a skill used once before. However, he does not know how to deal with it, as his magic seems to no longer be working. At that moment, information arrives that the constellation Bowed Raven has decided to return the weapon he had lent. The Ravens also inform him that they want the boy to quickly deal with the disgusting goat, so the young man decides to use the weapon as a form of gratitude. Before being struck by the opponent, he activates Taeguk swordsmanship. He chooses to use the enemy's strength and deflect. Suwon jumps over the Minotaur and lands a direct hit. He believes that this is the end as the monster disintegrates before him. Pan is shocked by what he sees, as he never thought it would happen this way. Overpowered by the protagonist, he falls to his knees on the ground, and the boy declares that this is the end of the opponent. Unable to believe what is happening, the goat constellation screams in despair. The system notifies that she furiously gives an order for her contractor to get up immediately. However, the Bowed Raven constellation has demanded the immediate death of the beast and the return of his sacred sword. After exterminating the opponent, Suwon thinks that Pan has already been incapacitated, but there is still something to be done. He knows that he cannot stop in that place. Still thinking about the opponent, he finds it ridiculous for a deity to stoop so low just to take revenge on a human. It is reported that the goat constellation is shocked and wondering if he is really talking about her. The boy nods and says yes. Suwon states that they have pride but lack the courage to face the demon king, and that they place their hopes in a human to go after him. The goat that plays with chaos cannot understand why a mere human dares to provoke her. Not understanding, the protagonist questions whether he is wrong. The system notifies that the Bowed Raven constellation has spread his black wings and said to come to him if they have the courage. Challenging, Suwon asks that if the man is so angry, why doesn't he go after Mammon right now? The face of the goat constellation turns deep red, as if it is about to explode. Suwon says that despite their lack of strength, they are intimidating humans relying on their father's support and calls them petty. This makes the goat that plays with chaos extremely enraged. Tuga, what is happening? she attempts to ascend rapidly. It is explained that this happens when a constellation possesses the body of its follower and influences the tower. And since they are prohibited from directly interfering with the tower, ascension comes with some restrictions. First, the rank of the constellation is reduced, and it also attracts a thorough investigation from the system and other constellations. However, the main reason they avoid ascensions is the penalty they suffer if they are defeated in that state. Dueling with the protagonist, the goat that plays with chaos ends up failing in the process, and a portion of the constellation's rank disintegrates. With that, the power used begins to dissipate. Weakened and collapsing to the ground, the goat declares that she will not forgive what has happened. But the boy responds and says that no one told her to ascend in broad daylight. Using more power, he continues attacking the monster, who questions what the boy is trying to do. Soon activates the authority of gluttony. At this moment, the constellation of the Hungry Prince says that it has been a long time since he had such a luxurious snack. While being devoured, the goat says she does not understand why the boy possesses the powers of both demon gods. The goat constellation falls below the ranking threshold and, as a result, loses its system privileges. The Hungry Prince says that although the taste was strange, the deep flavor was exceptional. Thoughtful, the protagonist states that he wasn't entirely sure if Beelzebub could consume the rank of a constellation, but he says the gamble was worth it. Meanwhile, the bowed raven clicks his tongue, saying that the young man should be the first player to drop a constellation during the tutorial. But soon notices that the absorption status is not working. Something ahead catches his attention. He realizes that it is an instrument that appears to be made by a fairy and functions like a breath through a weaving comb. The boy gains access to all the abilities the instrument possesses. Analyzing it, he thinks it is interesting, and that it has a B rank, just like Durandal, but it requires a skill level and performance. However, he decides to keep the object, believing it will be useful at some point. Then the system notifies him that he has successfully absorbed Pan's rank. The word rank catches the boy's attention. He realizes that absorbing nutrients has increased his stats by 10. Because of this, he has obtained the Satyr's mark. Looking at his hand, the boy notices a divine mark that only those chosen by the gods possess. With this, he can transcend human limits. Happy, the young man reflects that he never imagined he would gain a divine mark and that the authority of gluttony is much stronger than he thought. The young man wonders what would happen if he continued absorbing other gods at this rate. The system explains that this is a divine mark containing Pan's power, but its rank and abilities are not revealed. It is reported that by absorbing more nutrients through the authority of gluttony or fulfilling certain conditions, the absorption power will increase. But Suwon says there are no problems after all. He plans to use the authority of gluttony freely from now on. He thinks that what started as a simple act of revenge against Pan has now turned into an unexpected reward. However, he hesitates about whether he should return. Far from there, the group continues fighting monsters and says it feels as if more opponents keep gathering. But they agree with their friend that they are stronger than before. More monsters begin to appear in the area, not to mention the skeletons that Baekhyun had summoned. The system notifies that Lee Hanel has used Bloodwing. They comment that she managed to use quite a formidable ability since it can not only stop but also cause bleeding. The young woman thanks Lord Marbas. It is explained that the blood-stained lion constellation cleared his throat and turned his face away, saying there was no need to thank him. A melody fills the air, making part of the group wonder what it is. With the sound being played, Siu notices that the monsters have entered a state of confusion. She knows that only one person has the capability to cause that. A moment earlier, Suwon appears riding an animal, rushing forward. He wonders how the group is handling things at that moment and hopes that no one has died. Observing, the young man realizes that everyone is fighting well, and he admits that he thought they would be struggling because of the sheer number of monsters, but he realizes that they can handle it without his help. However, he believes it's fine to lend a hand. With the instrument in hand, the boy opens the Greed Vault. He plays a hymn used by the Naga tribe, composed of beings with a half-human, half-snake appearance to subjugate their enemies in battle. This music instills courage in allies and strikes fear into enemies. With the battle being dominated by his group, the system announces that the hidden quest, Revenge of the Spirit of the Woods, has been completed. Because of this, all of Pan's schemes have turned to smoke. Walking forward, he approaches the group and Siu is happy to see him again. She says she knew it was him who had come to help and thanks him. Another young man shouts for his brother and rushes toward the boy. The man says that he always believed in him but is interrupted and told not to come any closer. Suwon thinks that he could never like that guy because of the deceitful way he acted before his regression. However, after seeing him return on the White Wolf, he ended up liking him a little more. Then he thanks him for the affection and says that he will return to the White Wolf. Listening, the young man says that he means Bakrang. The protagonist thinks that he used the power of the treasure vault to quickly join the group, and this caused the animal's color to change. It is explained that it is a legendary horse known for running 1,600 kilometers per day. With this, the blonde boy is shocked to see his animal turn red. Then he hugs the skeleton and says that from now on, it will be called Redrang. Suwon says that the color is not a real problem, but that it is a bit weak due to being overworked. The young man decides to take a look. Baekhyun approaches and asks to examine it. After all, he is an expert in skeletons. Upon analyzing, the young man explains that its durability is a bit low, but its bone resistance has increased. And he states that this would be a problem because without muscles, all the impact would be absorbed by the bones. Even so, the blonde says that his redrang is incredible and that he will take good care of it since it was a gift. Suwon informs Seo that as soon as everything is in order, they will depart. He also explains that everyone should reach their respective destinations in about a day. Walking with the group, they arrive at a cliff and the height frightens them. Seo asks the leader if that is where they will set up the base, and the protagonist says yes, after all, with the cliff, it is easier to defend. The boy explains that this location marks the boundary of the third tutorial, and that, no matter how skilled he is as a player, he could not cross that place. Therefore, it would be impossible to be ambushed from behind. Suwon thinks that most players will end up fighting at the entrance of the zone. But once his group establishes a base there, it will be practically guaranteed that they will complete the third tutorial. However, he knows that Pan's unexpected interference may cause other constellations to hold a grudge against him. And because of this, he cannot lower his guard. Seo appears and asks if Aram and Dawn can start building the base, and the two girls say yes. The pair of girls say they were eager to start working, and that it is time to show their strength. One of them asks if she can request more wood from the protagonist. He agrees and the two celebrate. The other group members say that they will also help. The system notifies that the collision will begin and instructs them to survive until only half of the players participating in the current tutorial remain. It is explained that during the collision, Suwon will be able to fully receive the achievements of any player he defeats. Thoughtful, he believes the objective is simple: just to survive. Analyzing, he assumes that the surroundings of the forest must already be a sea of blood. One of the boys, who is not part of the protagonist group, wonders why players are attacking each other, and another young man asks if he hasn't understood the objective there. Scared, the young man begs to be spared. After all, it was difficult to get there. But the opponent says that he shouldn't care. After all, if he kills one more, he will survive, declaring that the boy will be sacrificed. In the middle of the forest, more groups walk among the trees. The constellation Dark Old Man with white hair shouts that now is the time. Someone asks if killing will really grant power. The system explains that the constellation became even more irritated, saying that the boy dared to repeat the same words. Understanding, the boy says that he will not just destroy one person but the entire clan. It is explained that the Dark Old Man constellation shouted for him to hurry and show the power he possesses. But the young man calls the old man a cursed being and says that he is not a slave. He states that at first he listened because he had borrowed power, but now the old man wants to interfere and give orders and everything. Revolted, the man thinks that as soon as he finishes all this, he will take his power back. With that, he will put an end to the noisy constellation once and for all. The group keeps walking and thinks that those guys went deep and do not understand how they passed through so many monsters. Suddenly, a young man from the gang points and tells his leader to look in a certain direction. Scared, the man questions what that could be. Then he notices the fortress built near the cliff. Confused, he asks the constellation what that is, and the Dark Old Man shouts, asking why the young man has not advanced yet. He empowers his group and tells them not to be afraid. After all, there is a cliff behind the group. Therefore, he orders them to push them off the cliff and thus win the trial. But upon trying to invade the location, he is blocked and comes face to face with a barrier. No one understands what is happening and keeps questioning it. Analyzing what is preventing entry, the leader of that clan wonders if it could be a barrier. Once again, the Greed Vault was opened, and Carmelder's defensive magic circle was also activated. It is explained that this improvised circle blocks all enemy attacks, though it does not last very long. Inside the protective dome, Seo asks her friend how he did that. Suwon says that he found something useful in the goblin village that attacked last time. And with that, he used magic stones for Carmelder's defense circle, and even though it lasts for only a short time, it is enough to buy them 5 minutes. Surprised, the girl says that the boy never stops impressing her, and that it almost seems like he is from the future. Then he asks the young woman to hurry and give the order to attack since the protection will not last long. She quickly gives orders to the group to prepare. Everyone agrees and begins organizing the defense. Aram and Dawn think that when defending a fortress, they need to use catapults. The two use the materials and launch a large rock toward the group outside. They celebrate that their defensive setup worked. A battle over the barrier begins with both attack and defense throwing objects over the protection. Seong thinks that the leader of the other clan is no different from a human catapult, but he also will not lose. The system informs that the power of Fireball has been strengthened according to the Black Magic Tower. A huge explosion occurs and the order is given not to retreat and to break the barrier. Suwon spots reinforcements arriving for the opponents. He says that he did not expect so many constellations to hate Mammon. Once again, the Greed Vault is opened and the protagonist retrieves an object from within. It is explained that it is an archery technique from the Grad Empire, developed to train soldiers, and that it instilled fear in various kingdoms. Preparing himself, he places the arrow on the bow and gets ready to fire at the enemy. The launched arrow almost hits one of the opponents, who manages to jump and dodge. With this miss, two of them mock, questioning whether Suwon's aim is bad and claiming that he is not as incredible as they thought. Suddenly, the arrow that struck the ground begins to crack the soil. A massive explosion erupts in the area. The system notifies that player Kim Taehyun has been defeated and that 3,910 points have been stolen. In addition, James Dean has also died, yielding 4,180 points. Thoughtful Suwon says that it is disappointing that the authority of gluttony cannot be applied to players, and that he was only able to devour Pan's contractors after being idolized. He believes that the time has come. It is reported that the number of players is now less than 3/4. Additionally, hungry ogres have started appearing on the battlefield. The protagonist states that they are a tastier prey than the players. Giving orders, he asks Sua to take care of the base, and the young woman questions whether it is not dangerous for him to go alone. But the young man says that it is easier for him to go alone as he can run if things go wrong, and taking her along would only slow him down. Kang Han-cheol approaches and says that he will go with him, and the protagonist accepts. He thinks that the man's company is more than welcome. Mounted on skeletal beasts, they ride quickly and talk about whether the hungry ogre monster is strong. Keel says that he can't wait to face the enemy. The protagonist thinks that his friend must be itching for a fight at that moment since he has only been dealing with weaklings until now. Curious, the man wonders how they will find the monster, and the young man tells him not to worry, and he adds that he will know whether he wants to or not. Keel asks what that means. Then one of the hungry ogres appears, holding a young man by the hands, shocking Kang. Both observe the monster and think that it may have already devoured several players. They notice that there are 2 monsters in the area. Suwon takes the lead and heads toward the enemy. Determined, he informs his friend that they will eliminate them all. The protagonist thinks that he has been training every day, and because of that, he can confidently say that he has no reason to worry about Han-cheol. He charges at the opponent, believing that he will end everything with a single strike. But he is noticed by the ogre, who calls him a soft human. Hungry, the monster tries to grab the protagonist. The constellation, the Hungry Prince, says that he feels the same and salivates from the ogre's perspective. However, this does not make Suwon back down, and he continues advancing toward the enemy to face him. Once again, the Greed Treasure Vault is opened, and Camille's dagger technique is activated. It is explained that only 5 people in the world possess this technique, and that it is usually used with 2 swords. The boy charges forward and manages to wound the opponent, who screams in pain. Suwon thinks that he is using Camille's dagger technique, which targets tendons and blood vessels. He promises to sever all the enemy's veins. Confident, the young man thinks that he can use a technique that someone spent decades mastering just by opening the treasure vault. Knowing that the power is his, the protagonist feels like he is cheating. Even so, he manages to defeat the quest monster and obtains ogre horns. The system also notifies that his personal contribution has increased by 10,000 points and that he received an additional 5,000 points for defeating it alone. Suwon thinks that the experience and conquest points are disappointing. It is explained that the Hungry Prince constellation is looking at the prey with a greedy gaze. Remembering Kang Han-cheol, the young man wonders if his friend is doing well. Nearby, an ogre is still alive and tries to strike his friend. The monster declares that it will eat the big human. But Kang does not give up and continues facing the opponent. He realizes that the monster is quite strong, but he knows that he is even stronger. Using all his strength and power, he manages to throw the enemy far away. Meanwhile, Suwon thinks that there is still a long way to go before he can surpass that guy. However, the ogre is still alive and notices the presence of a dangerous human. Shouting, he declares that he will kill Han-cheol. Clenching his fists and focusing, the man calls upon Tai Chai. On the monster's first strike, he dodges and on the counterattack lands a solid hit. He shouts to begin the battle. Suwon observes from a distance and realizes that the young man combined Tai Chi with the battle initiation. The protagonist notices that his friend is already modifying and combining techniques for use. With this, he concludes that he does not seem like an ordinary guy. Still thinking, he reflects that Kang was insanely powerful before the regression, but now he's even stronger. However, he notices that the energy consumption is quite severe. To help, Suwon hands a potion to his friend, who thanks him. Han-cheol thinks that at this rate, they will quickly take down all the hungry ogres. The tutorial control office is shown, where a young man is irritated while typing on a computer. Administrator Tuning says that the tutorial is chaotic and wonders why all the promising players had to enter at the same time. He notices that many have survived and that now they need to observe them and record everything. Still thinking about the game and talking to himself, he says that when the 3rd chapter ends, the number will be cut in half. On the phone, someone asks the leader if he has seen what happened. They explain that there are people recklessly hunting the hungry ogres in the game. Irritated, the man becomes outraged by what he has just heard. On the other end of the line, the person explains that Jung Suwon and Kang Han-cheol are responsible. Still very stressed, the leader says that is not the problem and asks if the young man read the manual. He states that if more than 90% of the hungry ogres are hunted, that guy will appear. Inside the tutorial, a strange being emerges near the protagonist and his friend. Suwon is startled upon seeing the new opponent, and he realizes that it is a hidden piece that even he was unaware of, the ogre chief, Krag Hatlek. Hungry, The chief asks if they are not bringing him food and shouts that he is starving. The other ogres approach and beg for forgiveness for failing to bring food. Kang asks his friend what he is going to do as even the smaller ones in the group are gathering. The young man grips his weapon and wonders about a hidden part he has never faced. He says that he must defeat them all and declares that he will handle the big one, asking his companion to take care of the smaller ones. One of the ogres says he will get food for Hatlek. Upon encountering Kang, he shouts that he has found a meal. But the young man remains unfazed and declares that he will be the monster's opponent. Nearby, the protagonist prepares to grab the chief. He attempts to land a strike but realizes that the enemy is tougher than he expected. Hatlek says that this is fast food and that it is annoying. As they duel, it is reported that the power of Lightning Chain has been enhanced, just like Freezing Wave, which has also been improved. Using his freezing magic, Soon approaches the chief, who says that the power being used is ridiculous. Then the protagonist opts to use another spell and opens the Greed Vault. Black flames emerge, and it is explained that this is a spell used by the Mage of the Black Tower, who spews flames that engulf the opponent. After the boy casts the spell, it is announced that this magic has also been enhanced. Screaming, the ogre chief says that it is hot and painful. Desperate, he questions how the young man dares to do that, and he promises to finish him off. Aiming to exterminate the opponent, the boy thinks that there is something worth trying on a creature like this enemy. He grabs his sword and wonders if it will be enough. It is explained that this is the goblin longsword and that its conditions seem suitable for use. Suwon thinks that it seems absurd to use such a low-class weapon, even weaker than the monsters that barely scratched it with the dagger fang. Once again, the Greed Vault was opened and poisoned blood, the hunting sword, was activated. It is explained that the hero Beowulf used this sword to kill Grendel's mother, and that this weapon grows stronger whenever it is bathed in blood. But Suwon thinks that the weapon's class does not matter and that he only needs to use it once. Irritated, Hatlek calls the young man an insolent human and declares that he will not forgive him. As he tries to attack, he is struck by the boy's sword and red liquid flies through the air. It is said that the goblin longsword could not withstand the power of fronting and disintegrated. The poisonous aura within fronting erupted. Suwon thinks that the opponent's skin is already weakened, and that it is impossible for him to withstand the poison. The system notifies that the hidden boss has been defeated. With this, the protagonist's level has increased and his personal merits have also risen by 100,000 points. Exhausted, Suwon thinks that there are too many messages for him. It is explained that the hungry prince constellation is chewing the food eagerly and with wide open eyes says that it is delicious. Suddenly, Suwon notices that the ground is cracking around him. He says that his friend is strong and single-handedly defeated the ogres, while Kang says that he is still slower than the protagonist. Once again, the boy offers a drink and states that it is time to return to the base. A new message appears announcing that for the first time in tower history, the ogre chief has been defeated. Because of this, he has received a special benefit, and all the players in his clan have been granted pass to Chapter 4 of the tutorial. Han Chiol thinks that this is far too generous, while Siu thinks that she must prepare well for the next chapter. Observing from outside the game, someone asks the leader if the tutorial pass is correct. The man tries to say that something like this has never happened before, but his boss calls him an idiot and states that the protagonist defeated Hatlek, and because of this, he must now start hunting players. If he kills some of the promising ones, the gods' protest will be significant. Quickly, the leader says that they did not just give a reward, but also removed a great threat. Furthermore, he claims that letting them pass will not have much impact on the next chapter. The next tutorial challenge is the Siege Battle. Explaining, the system states that the group must cross the walls and advance, and if they defeat the Lord, they will own the castle until the end of Chapter 5. Seo asks if all the walls are castles, and the boy confirms that each has its unique characteristics. With this, the girl understands that choosing which castle to attack is crucial. Suwon thinks that his friend is intelligent, as expected of her. Thoughtful, the boy reflects that the goal of this chapter is to capture the castle, and that Chapter 5 must be about defending it. Because of this, the choice of which castle to attack becomes an important factor. A location comes to his mind, and he believes that he must go there. In this chapter, the Golden Fortress is the most powerful and therefore the hardest to conquer. However, Suwon thinks that he does not know its location. He asks Jean Pil to investigate the area and find out which castles are nearby. To Siwa, he asks that she gather the clan members and search in the opposite direction, scouting the fortresses. As for himself, the boy says that he will invade some empty houses. According to the tutorial rules for this chapter, each clan can only occupy one fortress. However, there are no rules against stealing rewards without taking control. Suwon activates Hilker's stealth technique, which speaks of a notorious master of shadows who once terrorized the nobles of the continent. The protagonist thinks that thanks to the memories of his past life, he even remembers the layout of the central fortress and knows that, because of this, avoiding traps and monsters will be quite easy. Someone asks him if he can hear, also questioning whether he has already discovered anything that he can report. Suwon says that not yet, and that he was just amazed by the device, which is practically a cell phone. He looks at the object and explains that it is a communication stone created by infusing a mana crystal with telepathy magic. But in reality, it is more like a small radio than a cell phone, and by fusing it with mana, telepathic communication becomes possible. Concerned, he asks Siu, if everything is okay, and the young woman says that she plans to explore until sunset and then rest. The girl tells her friend that he should rest a little as well, but the young man states that he will push forward a bit more. Thoughtful, he reflects that now he needs to refocus on the treasure in front of him. Observing, he sees two young men talking and knows that the area behind them is a storage room. The system notifies that the hungry prince licks his lips upon seeing the food before him. The guards announce that it is time for a shift change, and one of them asks what's for dinner. Suun thinks that fortunately the monsters here are hybrids and therefore have perception levels comparable to humans. Because of this, sneaking past them is easier than getting past goblins. He moves quickly, but one of the guards notices and asks who is there. The other soldier asks if there was something, but his friend says it must have just been his imagination. Inside the observation tower, the protagonist realizes that there are many archery-related items, which was expected. But the best weapon in the area is only a D-class one, and that even though this is a C-class fortress, they should have at least rewarded him with a C-class bow. However, he believes it is fine and that there is nothing unusual. He sees a group of humans, but they all went to the other side. Looking through a crack in the door, the boy spots the fortress lord. Thinking it through, he realizes that if there is no decent equipment in the room, he will just have to take the lords. In the tutorial control room, the administrator relaxes, thinking that getting rid of problems like the protagonist puts his mind at ease. Now he believes he can relax and watch the newcomers grow. Suddenly, his phone rings. He feels something unsettling inside, as if he has been in this situation before. On the other end of the line, someone tells him to check the next area immediately and warns that player Suun is about to do something crazy again. Looking at the game, he sees a fortress being blown up. Nervous, he shouts, questioning what the boy is doing. He realizes that the young man is blowing up every single castle. Going even further, he is looting the lord's items amidst the chaos. The leader calls Suun a lunatic and thinks that it is not as if he is claiming the official rewards, and that this is a problem because players are supposed to occupy fortresses and compete against each other. Desperate, he orders them to stop the protagonist immediately. Something bothers Suun, and he wonders if someone is talking about him since his ear is itching. The system announces that from this moment on, any damage to a fortress will be considered an official siege. Thinking about it, he understands that this is a challenge and questions whether they really want to play that way. However, he says that it is already too late. He activates Great Hunter, a C-class bow. It is explained that this bow was used by a lord and has abilities such as speed, attack power, and range. Suun thinks that he has acquired several C-class weapons, which are difficult to obtain in this tutorial, concluding that it was a satisfying raid. Suddenly, his communication radio rings, and it is Jong Pil contacting him. The young man shouts from the other end that he finally found it, and says that he is standing in front of the shining fortress. Celebrating, he shouts that they have finally found the Golden Fortress. Euphoric, the blonde calls in to announce that he has located the Golden Fortress, and it is revealed that it holds an A+ rank. Surprised, the protagonist recalls that he had only conquered C-rank fortresses. Observing it, he understands that the challenge is high, as is the level. You ask the hero if he is ready and questions what his attack plan is. At that moment, he opens the Greed Vault to use the Eagle King's monocular vision. He understands that it would be easier if they could defeat the Lord, but even with fortress-based abilities, infiltration is impossible. And compared to other fortresses, this one has an overwhelming number of monsters, all benefiting from fortress buffs. Smiling, he declares that the only option is a large-scale direct assault. She asks if that is possible, considering that monsters are guarding the gate. Then Seong explains that this is why they must prioritize the Lord. He says that if they defeat the Lord and capture the fortress, the monster troops will be immediately neutralized, and that once they cross the walls, Yuan Kang will clear a path for him to pass through. He explains that while they hold back the monsters, he will defeat the Lord. In shock, the gems question how he will do that as the gate appears to be indestructible. However, the boy tells them not to worry. At that moment, he opens the Greed Vault once again and then summons some kind of gigantic golden axe. Exuding confidence, he declares that he will break this gate alone. Quickly, he begins spinning, generating an explosion at the fortress's central gate. The guards on duty are shocked, questioning what is happening. As the smoke dissipates, the hero appears in front of his enemies, wielding Pang's colossal axe, a giant weapon said to have split chaos and stopped the sky from falling to the earth. The axe then disappears, and the hero understands that, as a consumable, it might seem like a waste, but it was the fastest and most precise way to get inside. Without hesitation, the monsters charge at the protagonist to attack him. Quickly, Kang appears, punching the ground to initiate his attack. At the same time, Yu activates the second tarantula leg to assist in the mission. After defeating the goblins, she tells the hero that he only needs to capture the Lord and that he must go quickly. Surprised, he realizes that the growth of the two only confirms that he can rely on them. At that moment, Yuxiu uses his impressive agility to dash through the battlefield. One of the guards orders them to stop the boy, but something quickly lands on the ground near the monster. It's a catapult that the genius is built for long-range attacks. Meanwhile, the healer Lai Hanmu activates Blood Wing. At the same time, Park is running among the monsters to lure them away. Watching all of this, Seong says that he thought the power gap would be too large, but he may have underestimated the members of his own clan. With everything in chaos around him, he understands that the area is still occupied by orcs and that they must be barely holding on. So he realizes that he needs to find and defeat the Lord as quickly as possible. Sometime later, the hero enters the castle and encounters his opponent. Sitting on the throne, the Lord says that even though he is an enemy, he will acknowledge him as a warrior. Rising from the throne, the monster explains that he does not like fighting exhausted enemies. Grabbing his weapon, he says that if it is to protect the fortress, he has no choice. Introducing himself, he declares that he is Golden Garden, king of the glorious orcs. Analyzing the situation, Seong understands that the monster's weapons and armor are on a completely different level from the other orcs. Demonstrating immense speed, the orc charges at the hero, who barely manages to dodge. Irritated, the Lord says that to claim the Golden Fortress, he must prove his worth. With that, the monster attempts to attack, but the protagonist manages to block it with his sword. Counterattacking, he strikes the orc's armor multiple times. However, he realizes that the orc does not even have time to defend himself and must be overly reliant on his armor. Changing his approach, he uses the third form of the Blood Wolf sword technique. The Phantom Wolf then charges toward the Lord, who barely manages to block it. Gripping his dagger, the protagonist declares that he has no time to hesitate. The Lord manages to shake off the wolf, but ends up getting his weapon stuck in the ground. Above him, the hero appears, ready to finish him off. However, the monster braces himself to defend, stating that he is still not ready. Responding decisively, Seong declares that things like worthiness are taken by strength. End of discussion. Opening the greed vault, he retrieves the king's sacred dagger. Stammering, the orc begins to recognize the glow of that weapon. Somewhat arrogant toward his opponent, the hero asks if he has the urge to taste the dagger. Nervous and suffocating with fear, the orc realizes that this is dangerous and that he must not be touched by that weapon. At that moment, he tries to retrieve his axe from the ground, but he realizes that he cannot lift it. Closing his eyes, he understands that this is how it will end. As he is finished off, he acknowledges that this is the true king. With little difficulty, the hero manages to break through the orc's defense with a single precise strike. The system notifies that he has defeated the Lord of the Golden Fortress and has leveled up twice, as well as acquiring the Golden Spear and Golden Armor. After delivering the fatal blow, his dagger crumbles. Seong says that it is a shame because it was the first weapon the bald guy made for him. But he understands that the weapon was not meant to last forever, making it an inevitability. After this battle, he invokes the authority of gluttony to devour Golden Garden. A screen appears before him displaying that he has completed the conquest of the final and strongest fortress. In the administration office, a man says that the guild managed to conquer the Golden Fortress too quickly, and that it was due to the tutorial pass. He explains to his superior that the other players will complain that this is unfair. Irritated, the man tells him to stay quiet. Then he asks the assistant if he thinks any other player could have achieved that conquest. He explains that it has nothing to do with the pass and that in this story only one player conquered the Golden Fortress. Then he asks if, by any chance, the assistant is keeping an eye on Seong, and the assistant says that he still hasn't figured it out. It is Mammon, the god of greed, and Beelzebub, the god of gluttony. He questions whether it isn't rare for the seven sins to be meeting with players, especially two of them at once. He explains that if they count all the members of Seong's guild, nearly all 72 lords of hell are watching them. He understands that a human coming from a dimension like Earth without magic or superpowers is causing a major uproar. Changing his expression, he declares that from now on they must assemble a special team, focusing on investigating and analyzing Seong along with his guild. Meanwhile, the protagonist team is having a great banquet. Suddenly, someone knocks on the door, drawing everyone's attention. It is the blonde Fan, who found something in the fortress's storage. Now fully healed, he reveals that he found the hidden stash of alcohol. Everyone is shocked as it has been a long time since they last drank. However, the hero remains with his arms crossed, saying nothing. He wonders if he may have been too strict with them. Then he decides to open the True Reed vault to retrieve Orvardo of the Desert, saying that they should have a toast. With that response, Park simply thanks him, declaring that the boss is the best. After the meal, the boy thinks that it has been a long time since he felt this relaxed. The system notifies that they have only 62 hours left until the final phase of the defense tutorial, so they begin constructing a full barricade. Observing all of this, the hero realizes that everyone is already accustomed to the tutorial and that they are acting like a fully synchronized team. Then the weird scientist appears, saying that he can also help rebuild the fortress. However, the protagonist refuses, saying that Bake should focus on the manticore's body, thinking that it is a key piece for the final phase of the tutorial. He believes that if he can activate the manticore, he might uncover the truth about what he saw before going back in time. After that, he asks to open his status screen. He is at level 17 with strength 122, agility 96, endurance 99, intelligence 92, and 5 points remaining. Coughing, he says that he is at level 17, but all of his attributes are already close to 100. Looking back, he admits that it is all thanks to the power of gluttony that he obtained. Observing closely, he sees that he is in first place with Real in second, Chen in third, Hang in 24th, and Seo in 25th. This Real, after all, is the player who ranked first in the tutorial before the regression. There is a 300,000 point gap, something difficult to close even after finishing a siege. Suddenly, someone calls for the boss. It is the blonde delivering his report saying that other clans are beginning to arrive and that some are conducting sieges to conquer castles just like them. However, he warns that there is a problem and explains that a specific clan is heading toward their castle. He comments that they seem suspicious and asks what he thinks they want. Sometime later, the fortress doors opened. A man steps forward saying that the boy must be the clan leader. Introducing himself, he declares that his name is Charles McGregor, leader of his clan, and comments that he must have conquered an impressive fortress. Clenching his fists, the hero starts recalling this man. He declares that Charles is the very embodiment of hypocrisy. He remembers that when half of his clan was wiped out, he had no choice but to join another, where they pretended to be kind. But after that, it was horrible, as they dumped all the dirty work onto him, treating him like a slave. In that past life, the boy managed to escape as soon as the tutorial ended, but he had to hide for a long time. Completely changing his expression, the protagonist asks what the man wants. Smiling, Charles says that this damn tutorial makes it difficult to trust anyone, and that he understands that. He explains that he is here to make a proposal, and that they must be exhausted after conquering the fortress. Opening his arms, he proposes that their clans merge, saying that they will handle all the labor. At that moment, the hero responds only with silence, while you also remain suspicious. She responds that they will discuss it among themselves first. Smiling, McGregor says he understands and that he will be waiting for a positive response. The girl then asks the protagonist what they are going to do and says that, considering the future sieges from other clans, it might not be such a bad offer. Without thinking twice, the hero simply responds that they will refuse. Then he asks her to check the man's contribution points. At that, she opens the menu and points out, saying that the 10th place is a pretty high rank. However, the hero questions whether she happened to see their weapons. He explains that it is not monster blood, but rather the blood of players. They talk about the Olympic game and that players help each other, but in reality it means they were accumulating contribution points. After seeing this information, the girl swallows hard while saying she understands. Then the leader agrees that they don't need to take unnecessary risks. Sometime later, the girl goes to Charles to inform him that they will refuse the proposal. With a trembling body, he questions what she is saying. He says he cannot trust people he has just met and hopes that he will be able to find and conquer another fortress soon. Downcast, Charles says that it is a shame. Grabbing a sword, he warns that they have no intention of looking for another fortress. With a cold gaze, the assassin says that instead of conquering another fortress, it will be easier to attack exhausted players. Irritated, the girl questions whether that was his plan from the beginning. Quickly, Charles and his group move toward the girl to attack her. At that moment, the protagonist takes the lead, calling for Kang. The muscular man quickly appears in the sky. Throwing a punch with all his strength to the ground, he announces that he will start the war, breaking everything around him. The punch is strong enough to spread to the other enemies. Charles warns that this is a single attack and that they should not panic. At this moment, the protagonist opens the greed vault to take out the lava item. With it, he manages to create a type of lava trap, as the ground was cracked by Kang. This was a combo with Kang, resulting in a fierce battle. All the men from the Hypocrites clan begin to suffer because of the lava. In shock, Charles questions what is happening and wonders where everything went wrong. At that, the redhead asks the hero if it is enough, and he replies that yes, it was perfect. Seeing the protagonist's name, Charles panics as he realizes that it is the man who was ranked first. Quickly, the liar falls to his knees on the ground, stammering as he begs to be spared. He explains that he will do anything to survive and also mentions that he is in the top 10 of the overall ranking. However, the hero shows no expression other than a murderous face. This makes Charles completely furious. Lucy notices something strange, but Gregor approaches, saying that he is sorry for attacking the ranking and that he was thinking about his clan members. At that, the warrior says that he has a point. Then the liar feels relieved and thinks that he made the right decision by changing targets. Smiling, he says that this woman seemed a little generous. However, he was mistaken, as the girl finished him off in an instant. With a terrifying look, she agrees with what he said, warning that her clan is the most important thing. Surprised, the hero thinks he did not expect that. Analyzing his trembling hand, he wonders if she might not seem completely disturbed. Apprehensive, the girl questions whether she did the right thing. Responding, Seong says yes, because if Alma hadn't done it, he himself would have. It is announced that there are 60 hours left until Chapter 5 of the tutorial, Defense. At that, the protagonist opens the true treasure vault of greed. He uses the mineral tree sap, which has excellent adhesive properties. The twins are impressed with the instant repair of the broken gate. At that moment, the old man approaches, calling for the hero and saying that he has finished improving the equipment. The gray wolf cloak was upgraded to category C, while the red wolf armor was upgraded to C+. The boy says that he loves it and thanks him. At that, the bald man says he had thought that his dagger was broken, yet even so, he says that it happened while facing the castle lord. Laughing, the man says not to worry, as he is happy that he gave the weapon or the end. He comments that he will finish working on the golden armor he requested, and the hero thanks him. At that moment, Seong thinks that the weapons he looted from the castle are enough, and that soon he will have to get to Randall. Pensive, he begins to wonder what the next item on the agenda should be. At that, he calls his lackey, who quickly appears. He comments that he will borrow some skeletons. Park explains that it was Lord Monzo who gave them and that, of course, he will return them. He then asks him to get on because he will take him wherever he wants. However, Seong says that he doesn't need to go along and that he should leave. With his head down, the blonde man says that it's always like this, that he abandons him and that it's not fair. Begging, he asks to be taken along and promises that he won't be a bother. A short time later, he appears riding on the back, saying that this reminds him of his old and reliable steed and strength booster. Looking around, the blonde man says that he can see several conquered castles from there and asks if that isn't the castle he invaded before. Seong then thinks that it must have been easy to conquer since he attacked first and doubts that it had any reward items. At that moment, Park asks where they are going and Seong questions why he even came since he already knew. In shock, the man asks if it is a dungeon full of monsters and says that if that's the case, he might as well give up right there. However, the hero tells him to forget about that because they are almost there. Sometime later, they finally reach their destination, a cliff overlooking a magnificent sea. Park asks if he knew there was an ocean there and comments that he never imagined the hero had a romantic side. However, the protagonist explains that this is the cliff they crossed. But the blonde man is confused, questioning that there is no bridge they cross nor land on the other side. Seong says it's good to see the sea after such a long time and suggests that they catch some fish to make a spicy stew for dinner. Smiling, he says that must be difficult. At that moment, he opens the greed treasure vault to retrieve the lightning spear. Seeing the disproportionate size and power of the spear just for fishing, Park becomes scared. Without thinking twice, the hero throws his lightning spear toward the sea. Its power was increased according to the principles of the Black Tower. The spear strikes the sea, causing a great dragon to rise. Frightened, Park asks what that is. Then Seong thinks that this was the source. It was a blue dragon, resembling a kind of leviathan. The aquatic monsters that appear when the 5th chapter of the tutorial begins. Before, they kept wondering where they would come from, but it was directly from the sea. Soon thinks that if that's the case, one more thing was certain. The system emits a sign stating that the constellation Crow with a bowed head gazes into the deep sea. That was where Leviathan slept, one of the 7 gods who rule the demon realm. That was the 5th chapter of the tutorial. There were 10 minutes left until the defense. The people in the castle were conducting a final full check and preparing ammunition. A group of archers was ready on the balcony. Among them was Jung, who had joined them with his bow and arrow. Yu asks if they will be able to get through this without problems, and the young man assures him they will. Below them, Jiang Krang appeared running, with Pill shouting that monsters were emerging from the sea. Behind them, several reptiles and fish were advancing toward them. Desperate, the young man tried to climb the castle to escape the monsters. He succeeds and hands a spear to the man. Soon uses this spear with his bow to strike them. The greed treasure vault was opened. He had the bloodthirsty demonic spear, the famous Hero Helther's spear. This must be stored in water because it spits flames. Jiang prepares and uses his skill along with the flaming arrow, shooting it and creating a luminous path as it flies. His companions are impressed. The young man asks where he aimed the spear. It forms a great light and falls directly onto the ground, causing a massive explosion. The explosion expands, reaching the monsters and engulfing them in flames. They begin to scream due to the fire on their bodies. The girl is astonished as hundreds were eliminated with a single attack. However, there were still monsters approaching the castle, so she orders everyone to attack. The archers begin attacking together, and along with the arrows, catapults are also used. The stones start hitting the monsters, injuring them. Stuin tells the girl that this is enough to defend themselves, and worried, she asks where he is going. He does not answer the question but smiles and says he is counting on her. She smiles and responds that she will take care of it. He leaves the castle and begins using his sword against the monsters. The entire battlefield on the cliff was designated with the authority of gluttony. The gluttonous Molar rushed to devour the lizard man. His agility increased by 2 and his wisdom by 1. With the green nectar, his health increased by 1 and his wisdom by 2. The constellation Hungry Prince states that it can devour prey without pause, and the young man asks if the status increase wasn't too insignificant. He also argues that eating the same dish repeatedly becomes tiring and thinks that the constellation is very demanding. After that, Zhang uses Lightning Wave face-to-face with the remaining monsters. Due to the variety of attacks, the constellation Hungry Prince praises him. He thinks that he has almost killed them all, so it was about time for that to appear. The system issues a warning that the number of monsters has decreased to less than 3/4. Darakan, the furious tyrant of the sea, appears as the final boss of the 5th chapter. At that moment in the Golden Castle, the players were fighting hand-to-hand with the monsters. The player Yahello used the Poison Wing ability against them, defeating them all at once. One of them comes at her from behind, but Siua defends her, killing it with her sword. She thanks the girl, and the latter says that she should help and to leave her back to her. Siua tries to thank her again, but gets nervous when she sees that a giant octopus was behind her. It uses one of its tentacles against her, but she dodges in time. Along with the octopus, there were several other creatures such as a snake and a giant frog. Scared, the warrior says that they look strong. Kang readies his hands, looking at them, and they ask if he is okay. He says that even if he isn't okay, he still has to do it. Yu looks at him proudly, and so the two charge at the creatures. Even using all their strength, physical attacks weren't working. The two retreat and conclude that physical attacks wouldn't work. The woman tells them to go back inside the castle and regroup. At that moment, a manticore appears among the monsters. The giant frog was attacked and the snake lunged at another creature, but is struck by the manticore's tail, which resembled that of a scorpion. She is startled when a young man appears, thanking them for holding on. Baekhyun comments that it took a little longer because he was fully applying the tail's venom. The young man's performance satisfied the constellation the horse that tramples death. He says that he hadn't helped much because he was studying the manticore, but now he could assist. Piddle asks what kind of monster that was as it looked cooler than his own, leaving Jongkrang disappointed. Before them, a message appears stating that the number of monsters has dropped, and because of that, Darakan has appeared. The player says that based on the patterns, that should be a boss and that Jong should have gone to take it down. Then he asks if they wanted to go with his creature to help him. Yu is worried about the castle, but the archers tell her not to worry, as they would handle the remaining monsters. She thinks that everyone has become much stronger compared to the beginning, both mentally and physically. Smiling at them, the woman says that she is counting on them. Darakan emerges, ripping out a tree and roaring, frightening everyone around. Observing the monster, the warrior says that it was ridiculously huge. Before the reset, more than half of the castle had collapsed before he could take it down. This time, he had to hunt it first. The problem was how to take it down. If it were just him, he could manage with Mammon's treasures, but the other monsters were a nuisance. He begins to think of a good method when an explosion occurs. In front of him, an elf appears using her abilities. This was Real Refrain, an elf loved by nature capable of commanding powerful spirits of all 4 great elements. However, her world had already perished. To revive her homeland, she carries the last seed of the world tree and brought it to the tower. But he didn't understand why she was heading in his direction and wonders if she acted this way in the last timeline as well. In the end, that wasn't important, as Suwum wanted to make good use of her. The elf was running swiftly through the trees. As the constellation the 5th day was looking at her with pity, the girl says that she needed to defeat that monster. She wanted to reclaim first place, and the constellation started looking at her with a strange, sympathetic gaze. Even the gods kept their eyes on that person. Real thinks that she cannot let first place be taken from her. Her goal was the eternal garden inside that tower, so she had to plant the seed of the world tree there. The constellation comforts her, saying that she was already doing a lot. That was the last seed of the world tree and the last hope of her people. But that level of strength wasn't enough, so she begins to use her ability. One of her spirits says to burn all the wicked, and another asks if they could bury them. That was her first time facing such a large number of monsters, and the mana consumption of the spirits was extremely high. Refrain begins to wonder if she could defeat the final monster alone. Suddenly, magic begins to appear around her, startling her. The elves said it was refreshing and wanted to know who it was. As they wondered, Suwon appeared, casting the magic around her. It was nature's breath, unique elf magic used to restore vitality and invigorate spirits. She confronts the warrior, asking how a human could use elf magic. He asks if there wasn't something more important at that moment. Darakan begins to approach, scaring the girl. The monster stands face to face with them. Jung asks her if she was there to get that thing too. Then he proposes that they join forces. The elf thinks that he could have attacked her when she was weak, but instead he used magic to help her recover. She thinks it was safe to assume he had no hidden motive, so she agrees, but only this once. Darakan's eyes begin to glow. The furious tyrant of the sea unleashes draconic fear. An overwhelming terror invades their minds, carried by the roar of the enraged dragon. The young man begins to feel strange and thinks it was cheating because he didn't have time to prepare a divine skill. He tries to move his hand and it starts trembling. The sacred seal of Satyr begins to awaken partially under the overwhelming terror. The first ability of the sacred seal is activated. This seal devoured all forms of fear. The stronger the fear consumed, the more powerful it became. Seeing how the mark on his hand glowed, he says he didn't expect it to activate at such a moment. Its glow was so intense that it was blinding the elves. Rio says her fear is gone and wonders what kind of powers surrounded him. The others were no longer paralyzed either. Wielding a relic-class weapon, the young man says he will leave that to her. He starts running, and the elf shouts for him to wait because they needed a plan. Ahead of him, the dragon begins spewing fire from its mouth. She thinks she hates reckless attacks. Summoning Self, she asks her to propel the man forward, and she flies to him. Jung finds himself alongside the small fairy. At that rate, they would be directly hit by the fire attack. But the young man opens the Vault of Greed and pulls out Hercules' brass staff, forged by Hephaestus before the 12 labors. Darakan releases its fire toward them. Refrain becomes desperate as a fire explosion mixed with lightning occurs in front of her. The elf struggles to shield herself. She asks her spirits if they are okay. At that moment, the man appears through the mist. He is unscathed, standing on top of the temporarily incapacitated monster. The woman thinks it was impossible for him to have escaped that situation without a single scratch. Suwon approaches and says that, as expected of a rank C weapon, it could only deliver one attack. Surprised, the woman questions how the attack was blocked. The young man responds that he struck the monster's nose with the staff before the attack. Because of that, the monster had to close its mouth, causing the explosion to occur inside it. Jung thinks that his strike dealt significant damage, but now he could see better. But the monster had ridiculously high defense as it was already standing again. Still, he managed to land a proper hit once, since it had let its guard down. Riel asks if Suwon had a plan, and he responds that he needs to find the reverse scale. Smiling at the elf, he says he will go ahead and asks her to cover him. She thought the young man wasn't thinking straight, but in reality he knew the dragon's weakness. With hope, the elf agrees and asks him to count on her. The spirits wish the man good luck. At that moment, Jung pulls a golden halberd from his inventory. Its weight and level were different from other spears, and it would not be easy to handle. Because of this, he decides to open the Vault of Greed. However, the monster notices the suspicious activity and launches an attack with its claws. The warrior senses the attack and defends himself with his halberd. It is revealed that the attack was blocked using the graduated Empire spear technique. Even with perfect defense, Jung didn't anticipate the monster's strength as his hand was injured. Understanding the difference in power between them, he concludes that he must finish quickly with a powerful blow. He had to draw power from another treasure, so he opens the Vault of Greed again. He retrieves a weapon that was once wielded by the ancient warlord, the strongest of his era. Suwon shouts at Riel, startling her. He asks her to cover him for 3 minutes because he will end the fight in that time. She is confused and frightened that he knows her name. But she realizes this is not the time to think about it and responds that she will help him. The monster begins to prepare a fire-spitting attack. In a few seconds, it fires the attack. The water spirit moves forward and says it will hold it back. It uses the shield to protect the man. Taking advantage of the opening, he leaps forward toward the dragon. He lands a direct hit on its forehead. He initiates a sequence of strikes and hits the monster's chin, lifting its head. At that moment, Suwon notices that the reverse scale is in the middle of the monster's throat. Then he uses a fire amplification skill to summon a flame. The elf's fire spirit decides to help, increasing the power of the ability. With the enhancement applied, the man's flame turns into a massive crimson fireball. Understanding the imminent danger, Darakan spits out a large amount of water, extinguishing his fire and hitting him. The earth spirit intervenes and summons an earth palm skill to prevent him from falling directly to the ground. Jung is startled by the monster for having underestimated it and thinks that if this continues, other monsters will appear. At that moment, a massive shadow appears on the horizon, covering everything. The shadow of a manticore under the sun appears, making the young man question what that was. Baekhyun, mounted on the manticore, asks if he took too long. Suwon is surprised by the monster he had tamed. Not just as a skeleton, but 2 levels higher, it was like a ghoul. The constellation Bowed-Headed Crow and Trading Death Horse are amazed by the resurrection of the manticore. The man realizes that if the tamer was there, someone else must be as well. But before he can finish his thought, Pil and Yu appear mounted on Jungkrang. In a triumphant entrance, Kang also appears, smashing the ground and killing multiple monsters. He apologizes for the delay, saying that his mount couldn't handle his weight. Jung is now surrounded by his reunited team. His brother asks him to take care of the dragon while the rest of the team handles the smaller monsters. He thanks them, saying he trusts them. Riel is bewildered by what she sees, as each member of the team resembled someone from the top 100, and they all followed the same person. Noticing the man's name, she wonders if he was the one who took her top 1 spot. But John declares that he will advance, and at that moment, the elf asks him to stop because she has a question. However, she decides that now is not the time and orders the spirits to advance. The dragon uses its roar to disorient everyone, but Jong uses the satyr's stigma, which devours fear. Without losing momentum, he activates the second form of the graduated empire technique and delivers a powerful attack on the opponent. Executing a sequence of attacks, he activates the 5th form of the technique, landing a solid strike on the chin. Then he opens the Vault of Greed to retrieve Escalon, the dragon-slaying sword. This sword was used by St. George to slay a dragon and symbolizes victory over evil. Jung says that this long tutorial is finally coming to an end. Then he finishes Darakan, landing a fatal strike with the sword directly on the reverse scale. Pulling out the sword, the system announces that he has slain the furious tyrant of the sea, the tutorial's boss monster. After the great victory, he levels up, obtaining the Fury of the Sea and increasing by 300,000 points. Tired, he asks himself if it is finally over. His brother approaches proud, saying he knew he would make it. Yu, excited, tells Suwon that he did great. Baekhyun reveals that after the dragon was defeated, the rest fled. He asks if he is okay, and he responds that he is exhausted. In truth, he was completely drained as the stigma consumed too much of his energy to activate. Refrain begins making her way through the group to approach the man. Pill asks who she is to speak to him like that, but he is brutally interrupted with a hand over his mouth. The elf asks why he had hidden his identity. He asks if there was any reason to and says he simply wanted to be number one. At the moment she's about to argue again, a loud noise occurs. The cliff they were on begins to collapse due to the tutorial being completed. Yu tells everyone to evacuate, but Jong heads toward the edge of the cliff. He says that he is counting on them because he still has something to do. She wonders what he is talking about. However, the young man jumps off the precipice and falls into the water, leaving them behind. The Warren is startled and thinks that she truly cannot understand what goes on in his head. In the depths of the sea, a monster approaches its leader to inform him that the tutorial has ended, that half of the monsters have been decimated. The great shark asks if it was really half of the monsters because that was very problematic. He wonders if this had ever happened in other tutorials, but this should be the first time since a woman appeared. A fish arrives, bringing information that leaves the giant lobster surprised. It tells its master that, according to the reports, a human had entered among the monsters. Its master says they could have fallen off a cliff. The other says that he thought so too, but this human had gills on his neck, to which the master responds that it was impossible. Suman opens the vault of greed to retrieve the mermaid's gills. He is impressed to think that a human body could breathe underwater. Then he begins to wonder how much farther it was to their nest. After defeating the dragon, the warrior earned a necklace that helped increase his affinity with the water element. It greatly increased resistance to fear, and the young man begins to think that he was only acquiring abilities related to fear. In his previous life, he had no real battles, so he constantly had to run from fear. Suddenly, he comes across a message saying that he has discovered a hidden dungeon and has earned 10,000 points. Jong is excited to have finally arrived. Inside, there were several monsters, and he thinks that this was no joke. But it had nothing to do with Leviathan. It was just a monster nest, but he thinks it would be a shame to pass through without clearing it. The system starts showing the points the dungeon would strengthen him with. With his spear and the necklace around his neck, he had something in mind to use as an arrow. He opens the Vault of Greed again and retrieves the weapon used by Wukong. It begins to glow. Suwon uses it in his bow as an arrow. Jong aims at a piece of rock and uses all of his strength to create an explosion upon impact. Smiling, he commands Rui Jingobang to grow. The fish tell their master that they are approaching the spawning ground, and he orders them to prepare for battle. Sharknim says that they made a contract with the tower to keep the monsters at an appropriate level so they could live there. Since Moore had survived this time, he was planning to borrow its power. His colleague asks if he was sure. He says it was better than letting his soldiers get hurt. They were arriving at the spawning ground, and the shark calls everyone to battle stations. But at that moment, they hear a loud noise, and the other monsters draw attention to the ceiling of the ground. Everything was collapsing. The ceiling starts falling on top of the monsters. Sharknim begins to wonder why the coral reefs were falling and what could be causing it. He tells his companion to advance, and the other comments that seeing the situation, it would be easier to leave the monsters behind. He says that they must protect the queen, and that even if everyone dies, the queen must survive. Because if the queen died, their contract would be broken. Then they would lose their place of rest. Seeing all the destruction he caused, the warrior thinks that the power was more impressive than he imagined. But to clear the dungeon, he must hunt the boss monster. Below him, several of the falling rocks continue hitting the remaining monsters. Suddenly, his eye begins to glow with the Emperor's penetrating water gaze. Among the monsters and stones, he finds several rocks glowing green. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.